You wake before the call to prayer, because the camp is already whispering the day into being. Clean desert cold presses your cheeks and withdraws, polite as a guest. You lie still and listen to the camel nearest your tent work, patiently at last night's mouthful, a slow circle of chewing that nudges the bell on the tether. Hush and tap, hush and tap. Canvas above you holds a faint blush of starlight and dust. It will not be this color again today. Outside, nothing hurries, except everything. Someone shakes sand from a mat. A coal is coaxed from the clay brazier with a reed and a steady breath. A small ember answers, and smoke rises, friendly with the smell of flatbread. Your own breath sits low and even. The camp agrees. You push the flap aside. Air greets you with dry coolness, tasting faintly of leather, lanolin, and dates. Tents make a low village of shadows, each a lopsided house that knows its walls are guests here. The horizon is almost black, but a band of not quite blue gathers like a promise. Camel outlines stack against it a row of heads, with expressions both indignant and resigned. They expect you will ask them to rise soon. They are not wrong. You pull on your outer robe and shake dust from its hem. The dust stays, it has seniority. Sand is everywhere in polite amounts. A quiet crowd that refuses to leave even when the story is over. You accept the arrangement and step into sandals stiff from night. The first footfall creaks. The second is gentler. You walk toward the dark humps, counting as you go, not because a thief is visited, but because counting helps morning find its balance. Leather panniers lie sleeping like patient dogs. The wax seals you pressed after sunset keep their tiny moons of shine. You pass a hand above them without touching, the way you hover a palm over a pot to feel its heat. Some hold gold's quiet cousin dust, so fine it moves like smoke when disturbed, and sits like a secret when not. You do not open them. Morning is not the hour for ceremony. Morning is the hour for ordinary courage. A boy from another tent brings a jar that sweats at its lip. He sets it by the brazier and tips a little into a shallow cup. The water is cool from the night and shy at first taste. You drink slowly, letting it visit the back of your throat, reminding your tongue how simple can be enough. He asks if you slept. Like a pebble, you say. He laughs. Pebbles do not sleep. He is correct. The sun is still considering its entrance. Two guides face the place where day collects. Veils soften their voices into padded certainty. They do not speak of distance yet. They speak of wind, because wind is the first partner you must please. One draws a route with a palm rib in the sand. The line bends around stones and a hollow where last year hid water. The rib's point pauses at a notch of dunes. Heads nod. The line is erased with a swipe. The path remains. You pass the handler who tells the same joke every morning. Camels would carry the world if only the world had dates at the other end. He says it again. The camel beside him groans in what might be agreement, might be philosophy. The desert holds the joke without comment. Your shoulders loosen, as if someone has unknotted them with two fingers. A rumor arrives like a small bird. A generous king once crossed these sands with more wealth than daylight, and the earth still remembers where he stood. The rumor eats well in every camp. You let it roost in your sleeve and do not chase it away. Spice is not a meal, but it helps the simple taste new for an hour. A basket of dates makes a quiet circle. You take two, then give one away, because sharing makes the second sweeter. The pit clicks in your teeth before you drop it beside a tent peg to confuse a future ant. Smoke folds itself into your robe and decides to stay. You will carry it until noon. First, light lifts and shows footprints around the camp, a choreography danced in darkness and forgotten. Here is the curve where you ducked a sleeping tether. Here is the heel mark of someone who changed their mind. Goat prints loop like embroidery. A little fox came, considered, and left without greeting. Dawn places the pieces and lets you arrange the scene. You kneel to check a cinch, running your fingers along leather until the familiar notch passes under your thumb. Then the second notch. Then the third, repetition as mercy. The camel turns its head to watch. One solemn eye under lashes that prefer shade. You scratch the spot behind the jaw where the hair grows in a tiny spiral. The jaw moves sideways twice. You smooth the pad beneath the wooden saddle tree and tug the strap until it sings the note you expect. Someone whispers the first words of prayer. Someone else answers without sound, moving through a pattern that has taught their bones. You rinse your hands with a trickle from the cup, enough to wake the skin and remind it that the day will ask for patience. The ground cool through the mat steadies your knees. You bow toward a place you will not reach today or tomorrow, and the idea is perfectly fine. The posture is its own map. When you rise, the camp has shifted one quiet degree toward departure. Stakes slide from sand, ropes loop into ovals, a mat folds with two precise flips, the same way every day, because the world holds together on such vows. You touch your staff to the ground, draw a short line, and wipe it away with your sandal. It is nothing. It is also the beginning. The sun lifts a thin finger above the dunes, and the tents change color as if they have washed their faces. Bells answer in different voices. Hooves test the crust of the first shade. You breathe once more, the last moment of almost stillness. And then, with a tug at a knot and a small, practiced cluck of the tongue, you invite the day to stand up. It does, politely, as if it had been waiting for your permission all along. You stroll the picket line by habit and by comfort, because numbers settle the morning. The rope is braided from hair and patience, and lies in a gentle curve like a sentence that knows where it stops. You touch it with the back of your fingers to spare it the oil of your skin, and feel the faint rasp that means it will not slide. One stake, then another. The sand collars each in a tidy ring. You nod to the knots without naming them, trusting old hands more than terms. The line seems to hold its breath, and then releases it as the first bell trembles. The camels watch you the way elders watch a familiar ritual, tolerant, almost amused when you change nothing. You count their shadows before their bodies, because the light makes neat shapes for you to follow. One tall neck shaped like a question. Two, with the torn ear you recognize. Three, who hums under breath as if arguing with an invisible clerk. Four, the patient one with white whiskers. Your mouth makes no sound, but the numbers pass your lips as air. They quiet the loud corners of thought and leave a clean table for the day. Leather creaks under a small shift of weight. A pad lifts, shows a dark oval of damp, and settles with the careful gravity of something that remembers long miles. You lay a palm on a shoulder. Warmth moves under dusty hair, slow and steady. The bell at the throat answers with a single syllable. You follow the tether with your fingertips the way you read a favorite line lightly, prepared to pause where a blemish hints at a story. The braid is sound. The fibers hold each other like cousins. At each post, a pair of panniers rest like two old friends leaning together. The leather is the color of toasted grain and smells faintly of smoke and fat. You touch each lid without lifting it. Counting by weight, you do not fully raise. The wax seals have set hard little moons pressed with the ring you wear on a cord at your neck. The sign is simple, a circle within a circle, easy to make cleanly when hands are tired. You tilt a pannier just enough to hear the hush of wrapped bundles shift, and then go still again. You trace the line of a stitching, where a mender's neat work crosses your earlier, clumsier patch. You keep the ugly side inward now, a private lesson traveling with you. The straps speak in low vowels as you tighten them, and then fall quiet. You run a finger along each thong, feeling for places where dryness has crept in. From your pouch, you take a thumb of oil and rub it in. Small circles that vanish almost as soon as you make them. The leather darkens, sighs, forgives. Wax catches a sliver of sun and warms under your breath. You test a seal with the nail of your smallest finger, not to break it, only to greet it, like touching the shoulder of a friend who sleeps lightly. The scent is faintly sweet and faintly sharp, a memory from hives far away. You catalog without effort. One pannier, sealed and sound. 2, sealed and sound. 3, sealed and sound. 4, to be retied at the corner after the next halt. In your head, tally sticks arrange themselves in a row, cross-marked in your mind. A helper falls into step beside you. He names the animals by his own system after winds, after days of the week, after spices from a market near his mother's courtyard. You accept his names and repeat them, marking the head ropes with your softer count under the louder list. The rhythm pleases the camels. They chew with solemn agreement. The youngest noses your sleeve for the date he assumes you carry. You show an empty palm. He pretends disappointment, then eats a dry tuft of grass with the air of someone who has made a quiet point. At the end of the line, you crouch to check stakes again. You pack sand around one with your hand, turning the heel of your palm into a tool. Grains push coolly under your skin. Polite resistance. You stand and look back along the rope. A smooth curve. No surprise lifts or complaints. It pleases you the way a swept floor pleases a householder before guests arrive. You do not own the desert, but you can own your order. Now the tally of the loads. You begin at the first saddle tree and move clockwise, because you always move clockwise when there is choice. It makes a circle of the task and brings you back to yourself. Each pannier has its twin, and each twin has its purpose. Some carry cloth-wrapped bundles heavy at the bottom and powder light above. Some carry coils of rope and spare hobble. Some hold provisions dates in a leather sack, flour in a tighter one, salt in a clay-lined jar that keeps damp out like a jealous gatekeeper. One pair holds nothing but water skins today, because thirst asks for its own careful accounting. You lift a strap hole to the next notch, then count again. One notch higher for the right, the left remains as it is. You lean into the flank to sense whether the weight leans back. It does not. The camel breathes and stares into the middle distance, where good patience stares. A fly visits and leaves. Your own shoulders notice they are where they should be neither high nor hunched. Counting hangs the day on a simple peg. A scribe passes with a folded sheet and a reed tucked behind his ear. He clears his throat, asking the air for permission. You recite the numbers for him without looking at the page, because the page is only a shadow of the thing you hold in your hands. He repeats each figure in a dry murmur while his pen makes crisp, whispering scratches. The sound is like walking on fine gravel. He nods and moves on, leaving you a glance that says he trusts your memory more than his ink. The glance fits in your pocket. A tale drifts from the other side of camp. Coins grew lighter in Cairo, someone says, when a very generous pilgrim passed with soft-handed gifts. Someone else says the story grows with the telling. You let both thoughts sit in your ear like twin rings. Gold and rumor travel well together. Each makes the other shine. You prefer to count the weight you can lift and the bundles you can touch. Still, the sound of the talk is pleasant. It rises and falls like the rope between posts. You kneel again to retie a cord where a knot slipped in the night. Your fingers remember the pattern better than your mind does. Loop, pass, draw, settle. The cord tightens and sits with a satisfied look you can almost see. You pat it once and stand. The sun has climbed a finger higher, shadows shorten into tidier shapes. A breeze thinks about arriving, changes its mind, then arrives anyway in a thin ribbon that cools the sweat beginning at your temples. The boy returns, this time with 2 dates he says he found by accident. You take one and let him keep the other, which was the plan folded inside his word, accident. Sugar wakes the belly like a good story told low. The pit clicks against your teeth, a small metronome. You press it into the sand near a stake, another mark in a row of unlikely gardens. You like rows, even of things that may never sprout. At last you stand in the center of your small kingdom of counted things. The rope is sound. The stakes are firm. The camels are present, ears at half-mast, mouths busy. The panniers are sealed and balanced. The straps are fed with oil. The numbers line up in your mind like prayer beads, ready to slide one by one whenever the day needs calming. You clap dust from your hands, one measured strike into the other palm, and listen to the soft report. It sounds like agreement. When you step away, you do not turn back to check again. The work is finished for this hour, and it would be unkind to the work to doubt it. You let the line be itself and walk toward the place where kettles steam and voices loosen. Behind you, a camel snorts and then settles, as if counting you into its own quiet ledger handler, present and accounted for. Shade comes first because water asks politely, and you prefer to answer before it raises its voice. You choose the quiet side of a low tent where light lies thin and behaves itself. Then stretch a rope between 2 stakes no one plans to pull. The rope already knows morning. It sags just right. You nod at it like an old neighbor and bring the mashgue goatskin turned humble flask. Stitched so neatly the animal's former opinions have become tidy seams. You set the first skin in your lap and lay both hands along its flank. The leather is cool the way a stone is cool. Not cold, simply uninterested in hurrying. A fine dampness clings from the night, proof that desert air can be generous when no one is watching. You press a thumb near the seam and feel the give that says the stitching is still a story told in small, straight answers. You turn the neck to your ear and listen. Inside is a private lake that prefers not to be discussed. You respect that and discuss nothing. The mouth wears a simple wooden toggle and a loop that remembers it. Around it, a short cord shows the twist you favor: a turn, a half hitch, another turn, a patient tuck. The knot looks like modest handwriting. You moisten it with a breath and draw it snug until it agrees with itself. Then you pass the loop under the toggle, over again, and lay the tail flat so it will not dream of catching on anything. Nothing ruins sweetness faster than a boastful cord. You let the skin's weight settle along your forearm. Weight tells the truth, not how far, only how ready. You tease a single drop onto your thumbnail and bring it to your tongue. Cool, with the shy taste of smoke and goat, a flavor that belongs more to memory than to palate. Your mouth finds nothing strange. Sweetness in the desert is not sugar. It is water that minds its manners. You hang the skin on the rope with its brothers. All turn so the breeze can move over them like a careful hand. A damp skin breathes, and when it breathes, it cools. The small worlds between the fibers open their doors and let a little water meet the air. The water inside, grateful, keeps a calmer head. You needn't name the bargain. You can feel it. The leather chills under your palm as if it has just remembered a shaded courtyard. The second mash cue bears a scar where a thorn tested it last month. Your patch shows a circle of beeswax seated in a ring of thread. You stroke around it the way you might check a sleeping child's blanket. No dampness, no betrayal. Still, you rub a touch of oil at the edges to keep the leather from growing brittle where it thinks about being clever. The smell rises: smoke, hive, animal, and your own clean sweat. It is the caravan's perfume. It lingers like a promise you keep making and keep keeping. You sit cross-legged and roll a small stone inside a third skin, listening to the soft gravel swish that says, yesterday's grit has given up. You pour out a mouthful clouded for a breath, then clear, and give the stone back to the ground. The boy appears without being called, holding a funnel made from a reed. He braces it with two serious fingers while you top the skin from a cooler jar, not to the mouth, only to the shoulder. Full skins become foolish. Sensible ones leave room to breathe. You lean to the spout and sniff again for spoiling. The nose is less forgiving than the tongue. If water sulks, it confesses here first. These skins were smoked clean over a low branch. Their insides wear a thin coat of calm. Sometimes you tap a pinch of crushed charcoal through the mouth and rattle it along the seam, just to quiet any lurking complaint. Today, there is no need. Today the water behaves like a guest who leaves a cup exactly as they found it. The rope fills with bodies brown, honey, ash, each a little different in thickness and voice. They creak as they settle. A breeze decides to help and rewards you for thoughtful hanging. You press your cheek to one and feel the cool slide into your jaw. It is not a miracle. It is obedience to simple rules. Even miracles, you suspect, have good habits. Now, the knots that will ride. You lash each skin by the shoulders with twin turns and a square knot you can release with one tug. You test the tug. It works every time, which is the point of a plan. The shoulder cords feed into a longer line that will clip to the saddle frame on the windward side, away from direct sun, away from thirst's loud mouth. You palm each cord like a weaver palming warp, smoothing thought as you smooth fiber. The ends get a half knot to keep pride from loosening them. A guide stops, lifts a skin with two fingers, and nods in the quiet language of people who have used up their words for the morning. He holds up 3 knuckles, 3 more hung before noon. You answer with your own 3 knuckles, which is either agreement or a mirror. Both serve. He moves on, his veil catching light that is not yet decided to be heat. You set one skin aside, the one with the brass mouth you reserve for rinsing hands before prayer, for the throat that carries verses. Another you mark with a strip of blue cloth for cooking and tea, because bitter tea deserves clean manners too. The last 2 are for drinking along the trail, and you tie them lower so they do not boast. Water that boasts ends up on the sand. The boy brings a twig brush, and you sweep grit from the rope so nothing sandpapers the leather while it breathes. He reminds you of the trick with acacia gum on the seams. You pretend you had not forgotten. He pretends he is not proud. Together you warm the gum between thumb and forefinger until it goes from stubborn to friendly. Then smear a whisper's thickness along a stitch line that looked at you the wrong way. The skin accepts the attention with dignity. You work without rushing, repeating the same touches until they become quiet music. Lift, press, listen, tie. Lift, press, listen, tie. The skins grow orderly and the morning grows warmer. Somewhere, someone taps a spoon on a pot, and someone else laughs at an old line that will be told again tomorrow and the day after. You answer the sounds with one more small sip to check one more mouth. Still cool, still sweet. The goats who donated these jackets have contributed more than opinions. At last the shade has done its part, and the breeze has finished its blessing. You take each skin down, slow as folding a letter, and carry it to the camels who accept them without remark. Straps open, hooks catch, cords lie flat, tails point away from rubbing places. You tuck a square of soft cloth between cord and skin, wherever a day's step might teach friction a new trick. You pat each one with the back of your hand, a whisper of a pat, as if thanking them in their own language. When you are done, you stand a moment with empty hands to make sure no more tasks are hiding behind you. The rope is bare, the shade is thinner, your thumbs shine a little. You lick one salt and smoke, and give the boy a nod that means the workshop of water is closed for now. You leave the place as you found it, except better. Fewer worries, more knots that mind themselves, and a little quiet stored in animal skin for when the sun remembers its job. You choose ground that makes no announcement, a neat square beside the shadow of a peg, level enough that a drop of tea would not decide a direction. You smooth a mat with the heel of your hand until the weave agrees with itself. Then set down the little balance, a brass beam no longer than your forearm, a tongue that points at honesty, two shallow pans that learned long ago not to chase the sun. When you lift the beam, the knife edge seats with a shy click. The scale looks like a toy until numbers step onto it and become manners. You brush each pan with a feather you keep only for this kindness. A slow breath follows. To lift whatever the feather is too polite to disturb, you rub your fingertips in a pinch of clean sand, so they surrender their oil. Gold is affectionate toward grease, and will cling like a relative with stories. Then you untie a leather pouch and tip it, careful as pouring a secret. Gold dust glows only if begged. Otherwise, it sits like stubborn sunlight. Today it behaves dull, heavy, already certain of itself. Your weights sleep in a cloth roll, domes of brass arranged from lentil small to date pit proud. You unroll them and greet each by touch. 1, 2, 4, 8 familiar cousins you never invite to argue. The scribe kneels at your elbow with reed and folded paper, not to command, only to remember. He wets his point and waits. A single weight goes to the left pan. The beam inhales. Your spoon bone, rubbed smooth by years, taps the lip of the right pan, and a thin thread of dust slides down like a careful stream through a narrow channel. The tongue considers the world. A grain too much, and it leans away. A grain too little, and it leans toward you, hopeful. You relearn the small weather of balance. With the back of the spoon, you coax one grain home again, as if stealing salt from a dish. Now the tongue stands in the center and thinks about nothing. You let it think for 3 soft breaths. Truth is allowed to confirm itself. It works better afterward. Cloth squares wait beside you, tightly woven, trimmed to the same handspan, each the size of a small cloud with discipline. You pour the measure into the middle, then fold north to south, south to north, east over west, west over east, making a modest packet that looks like a shy letter. A soft leather tie goes around its waist, snug but not cruel. For sealing, you warm a thumb of beeswax until it learns manners. Stroke it across the knot, then press your sign. A circle inside a circle, easy to know in dim light and late hour. You work in sets of 5. 5 packets measured, sealed, noted. 5 more while your hands remember they are good at this. The scribe murmurs figures as if they were verses, writing straight and plain, like a road without surprise curves. Paper can be offended by haste. You give it no reason. Between sets you feather the pan again, because dust has ambitions, and collects strays with the spoon's edge gentle shepherding. Nothing leaves this mat without confessing its direction. A guard stands with his back to you, where tents end and the open begins. He is not here to frighten anyone. He is furniture that discourages movement. His spear leans in the crook of his elbow, unremarkable as shade. He watches nothing in particular, and therefore everything. Safety, like tea, works best when it is quietly present. Now the writing clothes. Each small packet goes into a longer sleeve cloth folded to make a tidy cylinder, tied at both ends. Sleeves settle into the deep bellies of the panniers, under a layer meant to smell like linen and not like promise. Near each mouth, you place a decoy, a sack of millet that weighs like a rich day. The true burden you spread the way you would share sweets among many children fairly, quietly, with a finger to your lips. You test each pannier's floor with your knuckles. It should answer with a firm word, not a hollow one. A hidden board sits there, cut to the curve, wrapped in leather, stitched so only the stitcher would know it is not part of the whole. Your palm presses. The board hums a small, satisfied note. Gold respects a good floor, the way a guest respects a swept threshold. A breeze wanders from the east and lifts a corner of your mat. Your knee weighs it without ceremony. The beam shows a little stubbornness in the right pan. You check the pivot and find a grain of sand pretending to be authority. A breath, a feather, a thumbnail authority departs. The beam forgives you and returns to work with a straight face. Tools prefer respect over praise. You give them both, but mostly respect. From time to time, you rub the spoon's bowl with coarse cloth, because even a clean spoon begins to remember what it carries. Held to the light, the bowl shines in a modest way, the shine of someone who has washed and not rattled their jewelry. Your thumb travels the beam to feel for warmth. A warm beam sags in tiny, tired ways. The metal is still cool. The morning's still patient. You continue. The boy arrives with a shallow dish of ash paste, the gray kindness for clean hands when water lives in skins. You coat your fingertips lightly, wipe them dry, and your skin becomes less interesting to gold. The boy asks if dust is heavier than rumor. Today you say, rumor weighs nothing until a scribe writes it down. He nods as if he has just been handed a snack and wanders away to feed the same line to someone else. The rhythm holds wait, spoon, watch, wait, fold, tie, seal, mark, lay, count, note, breathe. In the wooden tray beside you, a small city grows orderly streets of packets, each house with a wax-lit door. The scribe totals a column and taps the page twice, his way of thanking numbers for behaving. He copies the sum on a second sheet because one memory is comfort, two memories are dignity, and three, if the wind is kind, a holiday. One sheet will ride in your tunic, one will sleep beneath a saddle, a third will wait with the ledgers. When the last packet takes its mark, you let the beam rest. You carry sleeves to chosen panniers, left of the second camel, right of the fourth, back left of the seventh, front right of the ninth, quiet patterns spoken under your breath the way you bless bread. Patterns are locks you carry in your head. They open only to the hand that remembers. Packets settle between folded cloth and hidden board. You lay a plain sheet over them, then a layer of plain things any eye would expect. Spare rope, 3 pegs, a bit of mended strap. Lids close. Thongs pass their familiar holes. The knot you favor teaches itself again and holds. A bead of wax seals thong to lid. The ring gives it a small moon. You rub a fingertip of dust from the pannier's own side across the shine so it will not boast to the sun. You stand and stretch back slow, shoulders careful as if lifting the day into a better position on its frame. The guard scratches his cheek and continues to say nothing, which is as talkative as you need him to be. The scribe tucks his sheets away and clears his throat in the manner of someone who has finished a fair task and prefers it to speak for itself. You fold the mat along its old creases. The feather returns to its niche. The weights roll into their cloth and tie shut with a small bow. The same bow your fingers will undo tomorrow and the day after without thinking. Before you leave, you sit a moment with your hands still and listen to the scale, which says nothing now that it is empty. Emptiness has a sound if you pay attention. It is the hush after a promise is kept. The camels look at nothing. They do not know what they carry beyond the sober press of weight and the careful way you fastened it. They do not need to know. They understand distance and shade and the meaning of a bell. You understand those things too. Between you is a contract older than ink. You will make the loads thoughtful. They will turn steps into certainty. It is enough. You find the griot where sound prefers to begin at the edge of shade, not too near the fire, not too far from the beasts. He has a mat, a calabash gourd, a wrapped bundle, and a cup the color of river mud. His low recitation runs in his chest like water under stones. You sit, because standing near a story feels impolite. The mat remembers your weight from other nights. A breeze lifts, then lowers, as if measuring the note he holds. He speaks names you know, and some you politely pretend you know: kings, strung like beads along a bending river, mothers whose chants could soften iron, journeys counted in days and praise and small, careful bargains. His voice is a good rope. It does not fray when pulled. From the bundle, he draws the instrument he favors tonight, a smooth brown gourd with a thin skin, pegs taught patience by dry seasons, strings from a small bridge to a neck polished by many thumbs. When he plucks, the sound forms a bead and rolls into the dust without gathering grit. Camels flick their ears, not to complain, only to agree. You watch his hands make paths you cannot follow, but can admire. One thumb keeps a quiet river, the other sets pebbles skipping. Four fingers drop small boats that do not sink. He is tuning while pretending not to. Tiny turns ask each string to admit what it already knows. He leans his head, listens, nods, climbs a short ladder of notes and climbs down again. Slower, as if coming down with dignity were the point. The words are low and unhurried. Lines about kings who set out with good sandals and returned with better advice. Lines about a river that curves because even water enjoys music. Lines about the patient road toward a house where prayers collect. He does not shout wealth. He lets it pass like a well-dressed guest, admired and then allowed privacy. Your lips move with phrases you remember, new ones you try on your breath, letting them find their corners. He repeats a praise name and changes one small word. The change opens a door you hadn't seen, and through it the same story sits with different furniture. Now a king is less a coin, and more a man with cracked heels and a generous habit. You nod. Generous habits work better than coins. Coins forget. Habits repeat. A boy arrives and sits 3 handspans behind the griot, where correction can touch him without crossing the line of respect. He holds a small drum, its skin tied with thongs. He taps no louder than a fly walks, finding the heartbeat that will keep this new verse from wandering. The griot touches the gourd with a knuckle in reply. They do not look at each other. Agreement does not always need ceremony. Tonight, the river is the star that refuses the sky. It bends on the floor of the world, pulling towns like beads along a string. The griot names places in an order that feels right: sound before distance, water before wall, prayer before purchase. You have walked none of those places in the way he says them, yet you have walked them in your shoulders, in the tying and untying and tying again. He turns a page you cannot see. The tale leans toward a pilgrim of uncommon softness of hand. No titles, only a posture. No sums, only gestures. A man respects a house by arriving with a gift, the griot says, and a house respects a man by placing a mat where his dust may fall politely. You let the sentence sit. A camel groans as if to contribute. The beast lies down and rises again in 2 motions older than stories. The griot smiles without losing the line. He has sung through wind and laughter and rain that argued with his skin. He plucks 2 notes that sound like a door opening and a door closing, and you can taste a courtyard, not hear stone cooling. Water in a jar, a shadow waiting. He sips. The cup leaves a damp kiss on the gourd. He wipes it with his sleeve, a gesture you have seen before and will see again. He asks without asking whether the next verse suits the night. You answer with a nod that means yes, and also means keep it quiet. You are working at the business of being calm. He moves from kings to their keepers of memory, the mouths that braid events so they do not come apart in wind. He names 2 teachers, then lowers his eyes. He sings of a day when gifts were set down as if they weighed only gratitude, of a market that measured extra shade for strangers, of a ledger that wrote the same sum twice because joy should be confirmed. Your hands begin the refrain on your knees. Tap, tap, rest. Tap, tap, rest. The pattern feels like walking to the beat of a bell you are not wearing. He repeats a line, with a small laugh folded into it, the sound of someone unbothered, that a truth is obvious. Generosity, he suggests, is mostly a way of remembering what you already have. You glance at the panniers where remembrance lies, tied in modest packets. Days' tallies sit in the mind. Night gives them a tune to travel by. Stars worry the rim of the sky. Smoke from 3 fires rises straight, then leans west. The boy with the drum keeps his quiet truth. The griot tests one last verse, choosing which will walk tomorrow beside the bells. He tries a line that puts river and road in one sentence and decides it can wait. Roads should not be rushed. Rivers never are. At the end, he quiets the strings with the heel of his hand. Sound unrolls for a breath longer, then folds itself and lies down. He wraps the instrument in its oil-scented cloth, pats it as if thanking a patient animal, and tilts the gourd so its round side looks like a small, seated moon. He tells you that a song must learn to walk well before it is allowed to run. You agree. In the same tempo, you stand. Night readies its proper shape. You thank him in the currency of such moments, not with coin, not with praise, but with a second of silence wide enough for his words to pass through and keep going. He will meet you later, in the refrain, on the road that prefers stories to company. You find the guides on the low rise beyond the last tether, where the breeze keeps its appointments and the sand curves like a calm shoulder. Veils lie smooth, only their eyes move, narrowed to the seam where light becomes instruction. You step softly, because thought feels thinner up here, and even a heel mark sounds like a loud opinion. They do not ask you for numbers. They ask the wind. One lifts the edge of his tagelmust, wets a finger, and holds it up as if judging cloth. Air leans from the east, committed but not bossy. He turns his wrist a fraction, nods as if agreeing with an elder no one else can see, and lowers his hand. Begins slightly left of yesterday. Another presses the heel of a date palm rib into the slope, and draws a line so fine you must squint to respect it. The line bends because the land does. He sketches a dune shoulder, a shallow where last season's water lingered, and a flat that looks friendly until noon shows its rank. His signs name behaviors where sand carries you, where it keeps you, where it pretends to be firm, and then changes its mind. You watch from a step back, admiring the ceremony of understatement. The rib makes a papery murmur. A veil rises and falls. A palm brushes the surface smooth, then tilts it again. One guide crouches and sights along the scratch, like a mason checking a course. He pinches a single grain, lets it drop, and everyone waits to see whether it will choose stillness or a very short walk. It walks east, politely. The nod that follows seems less like agreement than recognition. From a pouch, the eldest brings a sliver of charcoal and dots 2 tiny stars onto the packed face. He names neither. One keeps north when shadows forget. One rises early this month. He taps star, rib, horizon, then rib again the lesson told with wood. Angles follow, counted by handwidths from the shoulder of morning and the even edge of noon. He builds the day in polite fractions. A quarter watch to the low ridge, a quarter more to the acacia that looks like a thoughtful question. Half a watch under that tree, enough to make tea stare at the cup until it calms. A watch and a half to the scatter of gravel that keeps feet honest. He leaves a space in the drawing, a small silence where the wind may speak differently. Plans, like saddles, behave better with a little give. The youngest presses one ear to the sand, collecting news from hooves that passed years ago and somehow still travel. He rises and points with 3 fingers. The way to go, the way to avoid, the way that will tempt you when you are tired. His hands have grammar open palm to spread the line, 2 stacked palms to tuck narrow, fingers walking for slow steps through soft ground, a hooked thumb for stone hiding under thin sand. They speak to you without speech. A tilted chin says, keep the water skins on the shaded side for the first watch. A closed fist promises crosswind. Ignore its gossip. A forefinger settled on a wrist vein sets the bell tempo. Slow heart, steady feet. You nod, and your shoulders file the orders where muscles can find them later. Bodies remember before minds do. The desert prefers it that way. The rib draws a small square the camp you will make if the sky remains polite. Inside he marks the fire, the water skins, and the seat for stories so smoke rises away from memory. Dots show stake lines, closer to windward, wider where ground grows stubborn. He adds an arrow for dawn and another for the direction of prayer. A gust noses over the rise and folds a corner of the sketch. No one is offended. The eldest repeats the line a finger's breadth away, not because the plan changed, but because plans enjoy being reminded they are mortal. He smooths the old mark flat, then wets a pebble. The shine dulls to brown that promises broad-shouldered sun by mid-morning. They consult a leather strip cut with notches, 1 for the ill-tempered well, 2 for the patient one, 3 for the generous one. The youngest counts and lifts 3 knuckles, 3 skins drawn by noon, if the animals mind their manners. You answer with the most economical signal in the world, an unhurried nod. You offer a coil of cord the color of wood smoke. The eldest thanks and declines in the same motion. Your cord, his gesture says, is for binding burdens, not for tying the sky to your preference. Fair enough. He lays your walking staff across the drawing to check whether your thoughts lean. Today, it lies straight, like a lesson children understand. He grants it a small approving grunt with a joke hidden inside. You accept both, without needing to hear the words. Now the rib writes in the margins. Circles for thorns, dashes for the shoulder of a dune where a slip might quiet a knee. Across where ground is harder than it claims. He widens one curve so the caravan can breathe, and shades a little triangle for tough grass, which means everything to the camels. You fix its place with the taste of green your mouth remembers. When he finishes, he passes the rib for you to hold. It is lighter than you expect, and heavier than it looks knowledge's favorite trick. The wood smells faintly of oil, and all the mornings it has already survived. You place it back with ceremony, because ceremony convinces hands to be careful on ordinary days. The guides face the horizon, as if to bow without bending, then brush the drawing smooth. Not secrecy courtesy. Maps and sand are meant for feet, not for hoarding by eyes. On the walk down, you feel the plan settling into your muscles, the way a measured load settles into a pannier. A nudge left here, a warning to lift your feet a little higher there. A promise that the path is not one thin line, but a set of good ideas repeated until the ground agrees. Bells test the tempo and find it humane. You answer with a small correction of stride. The desert behaves like a very old teacher, silent, exact, and faintly amused. You step into yesterday's prints because they have already chosen their side. The sand remembers the caravan like a careful clerk crescent hooves, shallow sandal cups, a dotted staff line at a steady tempo. First light traces each mark with a thin rim. You follow the glimmer, not for speed, but out of kindness to joints and to mood. The first step declares the terms. The crust holds, yields a thumb's width, then holds again. A small sigh travels up your legs into the shoulders where tidy knots live. They agree to review the matter later. Ahead, the bell settles into a walking voice, neither proud nor shy. You center each foot inside a print and feel steadiness arrive without ceremony. In the low places, the wind prefers. Tracks cross tracks. Some are yours, some the saltmen's, some last week's company bound for the same well. A few are older and still opinionated, showing through like an earlier script under a fresh page. Most feet debate the same subjects: shade, water, pace, and when to stop pretending not to want both. Your stride learns the grammar of reuse. Heel in the hollow, toes on the firm lip, lift along the preserved edge. Where the path wanders, you wander with it. Manners serve better than neatness. A camel finds last evening's knee fold and settles into it as if returning to a familiar chair. You scratch his neck, a small bribe for cooperation he would have given anyway. On a windward slope, night-brushed cat's paw ripples across older furrows. Fragile to the eye, they hide honest ground. You match their rhythm short, longer so the soul rides the raised lines instead of arguing with the troughs. Each step adds a layer to the quiet debate between skin and sand. It is an amiable exchange. Both sides are right. Where the crust has lifted and walked off like a brittle skin, prints fail. You cross such patches with a higher knee and a slower mind, letting the foot test before it trusts. A guide marks them with 3 staff taps that say, "Think twice." When the ground remembers itself, you step back into yesterday's logic. Repetition buys a discount from fatigue. Small writings braid the margins. Beetle stitches, neat and then knotted. Sidewinder loops, a courteous sentence trailing away. Tiny bird feet, ending in the clean oval of a wing print. You greet these notes and place your heavier words elsewhere. The boy tries on the caravan's cadence like an elder's robe tripping. Then finding his feet, you teach him the count for distance. 12 breaths to a set, 4 sets to a measure, 3 measures to the good shade. Numbers make a short ladder for short legs. He asks whether sand likes being counted. The sand does not care, you say. Your bones do, and the desert respects bones that mind their arithmetic. Your staff lands in yesterday's dots and makes them darker. The sound is small, like a fingernail on wood. Between taps, you hear panniers adjust and settle. Bells from the lead animal speak a sentence you needn't translate. Keep company. No hurry. You match your breathing to the bell and discover you have more breath than you expected. Old paths are generous that way. Sometimes a print tells you the part you forgot. Here a deeper toe where you shifted a load. There a sideways drag where you teased a thorn from a strap. The memory pleases you because it belongs to work done thoroughly without a witness. You let the day step into that competence, like shrugging into a shirt that fits exactly across the shoulders. The sun climbs by agreed inches. Shadows withdraw. Edges blur. The bright rim on each print fades. Without the rim, the map remains, only less proud of itself. The prints are suggestions, not commands. They assist your legs. They do not own them. A reach of gravel refuses handwriting. You shorten your step and keep the bell sentence intact. Feet go from writing to reading, feeling for the phrase the ground wants to say. Here is firmness. Here is stubbornness. A camel chooses a slightly different line and invents a better approach. You follow without being offended. Wisdom does not require a beard. On a shallow bench, you pause to look back. The caravan seam runs behind you, a stitched line holding yesterday to today. Wind smudges part. Sunlight edits another part without asking. You accept the revisions. A path is not kept under glass. It is used and allowed to become something else. Stories prefer being retold to being stored. A rumor walks beside you and matches your rhythm. It insists a generous king crossed these sands with gifts enough to make scales smile. The rumor steps into your prints too. It understands economy. You let it borrow your stride while you borrow yesterday's. Mutual aid suits gossip and feet. The guides drift along the flanks, shaping more than shepherding. A raised palm slows a section. A low finger widens another. They invite you into older hollows where the day has fewer surprises. When a blank stretch appears, you mark it with 2 extra taps. Whoever follows, even if only you this afternoon, will appreciate the courtesy. Your body keeps what it can. Arms hang with small thrift. Hands rest until needed. Jaw unclenches because there is nothing out here to bite. The mind, pleased with regular duties, stops producing unnecessary opinions. It feels like moving into a house with fewer rooms and better windows. By mid-morning, the prints you prefer blur in honest heat. You switch to fresher ones, left by the animals with water-skinned steps that sink differently and offer rounder ledges. When even those soften, you choose the thin shade of a low ridge where the surface has held its ground. You follow that dark ribbon the way a pen follows a faint ruled line. At last, the guides lift 2 fingers, the sign for a short halt where wind has placed a blessing. You step off the old marks and stand on untouched ground, which feels both impolite and refreshing. You shake sand from your sandals, sip water that tastes of smoke and morning, and look once at the string of crescents running away in both directions, yesterday's and today's, braided. Then the bell reminds you the story prefers to be told while walking, and you answer with one more step into a kindly print. The bell begins before you ask it to, a small copper mouth clearing its throat as the caravan gathers itself. It hangs from a plate of goat hair, green at the seams where seasons have left their thumbprints, polished at the lip by a clapper that knows its job. When the lead camel rises, the bell speaks a 3-beat phrase. Hooves answer with calm crescents in the cool morning crust. You listen for the choir, because bells prefer company. The second bell belongs to a shorter neck and rings a thinner word. The third is brass pretending to be copper, until you wrap a sliver of leather round its tongue to soften the strike. The fourth is naturally modest. You let it be the conscience of the set. Together they count the morning, into fair pieces. Your hands confirm the straps, 2 fingers below the throat so the clapper will not bruise. The knot is the kind that can be forgiven and still hold. You trim a stray thread with your nail. It falls and is immediately edited by the next foot. The bell repeats its simple sentence until your thoughts stand in neat rows. Some mornings the air is glass and sound travels far. Today it is cloth. The bell stays close and drapes itself round the legs. You prefer cloth. It keeps the caravan in one room. Behind you, the junior handler finds the beat and begins to walk more quietly, as if his feet have learned manners by listening. The guides praise the result by not turning. A camel's foot is less a hoof than a soft decree. It spreads, persuades, then gathers again, leaving the crescent that says, "We were serious and also kind." While the ground still remembers night, the edge is clean, a knife through fresh dates. As the sun begins its habitual lecture, the edges smudge. The bell edits with the weather crisper, when the world is crisp, forgiving when it blurs. You know each bell by mood. One laughs on descents, one argues gently on rises, one grows thoughtful on the high backs of dunes. You do not assign these qualities. You notice them, the way you notice which camel favors the left after a long watch. Copper enjoys a little theater if the cadence is respected. Every 100 steps you pinch the strap where it crosses the hair, so chafing will not invent a new story. A smear of fat under the leather lowers the dust in the voice. The clapper's thong gets inspection, still supple, not chewing itself, not dreaming of snapping in the middle of a verse. Tools, like rumors, behave if fed small, regular kindnesses. The boy asks how the bell knows the right tempo. You show him with your staff, tap, tap, tap. Echo comes back from metal and foot, then from breath and thought. The lesson is simple and therefore complicated. The bell does not lead, it reminds. Walk faster, and the bell follows. But the desert will notice and undo your pride by noon. Slower, and thirst will petition for a rehearing. In a stony run, the sound changes character. Copper speaks to stone with a brighter face, and pebble clatter joins the choir without asking. You accept the addition. The ground writes its abbreviation triangles and commas where crescents cannot form. The bell stays patient and keeps the sentence even. It refuses poetry when prose will do, and prose does well here. A cracked bell rides on the 4th camel today, a fine hairline from last season. You let it sing because its flaw lends a faint second note, a ghost of harmony sitting behind the main tone like an older cousin. If the crack widens, you will retire it to the tent's edge as a night signal. For now, it earns its place by making morning interesting to the ear. Midway through the first watch, the caravan sounds like a small town at evening, the hush of useful things. A pot lid settling, a door thinking about closing, a broom making promises to a floor. Drift even a finger width out of step, and the bell tells you gently you have wandered. You return, as if called by name. A trick you favor. A thumb of cloth between bell and thong when wind insists on mischief. The cloth softens the strike, takes away the bitter edge, leaves a rounder word. The camels seem to walk prouder when their callers speak kindly. Or you imagine it. Imagination is not wasted if it results in better knots and more patient hands. Heat climbs a rung and the bell deepens. As if iron in the sand hums from below. You let that hum fill the space behind your breastbone. Breathe in on the strike, breathe out on the sway between. The cadence turns work into ceremony. You remember the griot's refrain about gifts set down, as if they weighed only gratitude. The bells make that refrain credible in the body. Now and then wind wanders sideways and lifts the clapper before it means to fall. The bell stutters and corrects itself. You shorten a strap by one hole and symmetry returns. The guides catch the change without turning a dip of the chin, a tiny tilt of a hand. This is how caravans speak when words would be extravagant. Small signals that trust understanding. When the ground shifts to softer sand, the crescents lengthen into lazy smiles. The bell slows a breath to oblige. You give the nearest camel a wordless promise that the next shade is not far, and the bell repeats your promise with more authority. Hooves spread wider, splay politely, gather again. The prints look like a scribe's flourish at the end of a patient document. By the time the sun stands a hand above the horizon, the choir has done what it came to do, turn distance into a usable thing, evenly and without theater. The bell keeps speaking in a voice that makes stubborn ground negotiable. Wealth, when it behaves, might sound like this. At the signal for a short pause, you touch the bell to quiet it, lay a palm on the dusty neck that carries it, and feel the vibration fade into the animal's calm. Sound becomes memory, and memory for a moment is as light as breath. You drink, listen to the leftover ring in your bones, and think not for the first time that an honest timekeeper is reason enough to keep walking. A rumor keeps pace with you, light-footed and sure, as if it had been given a bell of its own. It does not need water. It has never carried a pannier. Still, it travels correctly beside the line, never in front, never sulking behind. You hear it first from the handler, a half-length ahead, the one who ties knots like polite agreements. He does not turn. He lets the words fall back as crumbs fall from a date cake. A generous king, he says, passing through lands with hands that forgot how to close. Gifts like rain, scales that smiled. Markets learning a new number for astonishment. He does not say a name. Names slow stories down. You answer with a small syllable that means continue without display. He does. Courtyards receive coin like thirsty earth receiving the first drop. Ledgers rewrite themselves while scribes pretend not to enjoy it. A robe hem gathers as much dust as any traveler's, which is the line you keep. When he finishes, he throws the rumor forward with two harmless words. It runs beside the next ears and is reshaped, not to lie, only to fit their stride. The generous king becomes a pilgrim with a soft hand. Gifts become alms. Rain becomes shade. Markets become houses where scales live and learn manners from elders. You let the new version stand. Truth in the desert wears many garments. The bones stay the same. The boy behind you tries telling it. He keeps the plot, but adds a flourish about bells ringing like hymns. The bells around you, doing honest work, ignore his compliment. Young stories begin with extra feathers. Walking will smooth them away. Wind lifts, then loosens. Words travel in short bursts, leap a few backs and settle. The rumor gathers decorations, the attendants multiply. The robe darkens. The gift pile lengthens like late afternoon. Each teller keeps a favorite detail and lets the rest drift like straw. You keep one line and let the rest go. Hands that forgot how to close. Enough for today's stride. You pass the scribe, reed tucked, head framed by folded papers. He hears and smiles without conceding. A ledger is not threatened by a song, he says softly. A ledger learns the tune and tries to notate it. He taps the page. You nod. Stories and sums are two ropes on one load. A guide comes even with your shoulder for 12 steps. Without looking, he adds a small piece. The generous king knelt where he was no one special, and let the same sun warm his neck as warms yours. Then he moves on, as if he had said nothing. You file the detail where your steps keep their posture. At the next short halt you drink. The water tastes of smoke and morning. The rumor tastes of cardamom now. Someone has added spice. You are not offended. Spice keeps simple things interesting when the day lengthens. Someone repeats the smiling scales and mimes a balance's tongue standing straight. Someone else corrects the mime to a softer throat. A scale is a throat, not a sword, you say, and they keep the line for later. Walking again, you test the rumor the way you test a strap. 2 fingers under, 1 tug. Does it sit? It sits because it asks nothing of your work. It asks you to notice. To notice how gifts can move faster than feet. To notice that the shade of a great name may fall on ordinary days without making them theatrical. You are content to walk in such shade when it appears, and content to walk without it when it does not. The handler ahead shortens his strap by 1 hole and asks, as if of no consequence, whether gifts can bruise a place. Sometimes generosity leaves a dent you do not see until the pot sits crooked, you say. He nods, then says that sometimes generosity teaches a pot to sit on folded cloth. You carry both sentences for a while like twin dates, eating neither yet. After a stretch of pebbles, the rumor grows tired of the same sandals and seeks newer feet. It drifts toward saltmen you will meet tomorrow, toward a market gate that will find it waiting when sweepers arrive with their brooms. It goes because rumor prefers fresh company. It goes because your company already knows the rhythm and will not clap at the wrong time. You test a pannier with your palm and feel the honest downward pull that never lies. Gold rides close to the animal. Gossip rides close to the ear. Both need balance. Both need straps that do not bite. Both ask to be carried without swagger. You tell this to no one. Proverbs sound better from older mouths anyway. You let the thoughts season your knots. By late morning, the story has been told enough to smooth its ruffled edge. It is quieter now, closer to the ground, less interested in embroidery. It has shed the extra attendance. It has kept the kneeling. It has kept the open hands. It has kept the bell-like steadiness suited to erode the tone that helps feet remember what kind of day they are willing to have. You notice how it keeps company with the bells without trying to be a bell. It sits in the space between strikes where breath lives. It does not tug the pace faster. It does not slow the line to admire itself. It is, you decide, a good traveler asking little and giving talk the way a water skin gives a careful mouthful. Enough to refresh, not enough to make anyone foolish. At noon you will forget it while shade and dates and a short prayer take the foreground. It does not mind. It will find other ears and return with its hair combed. By evening it may borrow a refrain from the griot that fits its step. By night it will lie down with the camp and breathe almost like a sleeping animal. In the morning, when the bell begins, it will rise. It always does. For now, you let it walk beside you, neither chased away nor invited to sit on your shoulder. You let it be a softness along the road, a hand that opens without fuss. If a generous king once crossed under this same sky, if camels like these once made these same crescents, if gifts once rang on plates of scales until the scales laughed well, that is a story that walks well in company. You keep your stride and let it keep pace. You see them before you hear them, a pale seam skimming the far edge of morning like foam along a quiet shore. Salt wears the sun early. It does not wait for noon to be bright. Slabs ride 2 to a side or 3 to a side, wrapped in plaited palm or coarse cloth that tries and fails to keep the whiteness polite. The air near them tastes of stone that once listened to waves and still remembers the rhythm. The guides raise calm hands. Do not tighten, do not boast. Make room as if for guests. You ease your camel a half-width to the lee and smooth the line the way a bedsheet is drawn flat for company. Bells soften, so the newcomers can find the tempo without apology. A trader at their head lifts 2 fingers, the greeting that promises business later, and asks for plain companionship now. You answer with the small bow that means, welcome to our pace. When the lines meet, dust swirls like cloth tossed in a courtyard. The salt camels step with square conviction, their loads uncompromising and honest. Each slab has corners that prefer to speak. The handlers have tamed them with short sticks laid under the lashings, lifting sharpness from hair and skin. The sticks creak in a forgiving language. Leather sings its low vowel. The animals breathe as if pushing a cool door that always opens. You make room by feel, widening here, tucking there, so no swinging load learns a new habit against your panniers. The boy runs with a folded strip and wedges it where rope threatens to write a complaint on leather. He looks back for approval. You give a nod he will remember long enough to begin making his own good guesses. The guides accept the joined company by the arrangement of their shoulders, 2 cords shaped into one. White dust drifts and settles on hair and sleeve, brightens a camel's melancholy face, softens the brown of your robe until you look as if you have dozed in snow. The taste is clean and old. It sits at the back of your tongue and makes the water in your skin consider its loyalties. You drink a measured mouthful, and everything in you finds its level again. Salt has a way of reminding a body what it already knew. Talk begins the usual way, short, practical, unromantic. How many days from the pits? Which well behaved this season and which has grown moody? Whether a thornfield moved after the last wind? Hands draw maps in the air. A square for the workings, a notch for the track that looks better than it is, a dot for the place where a rib broke on a hidden stone, and a good beast lay down and forgave the day. You ask little and listen wide. Someone offers a sliver bright as a moonchip. You run a thumb along its face and feel the strange softness of hard things polished by handling. He bites his own piece and grins at the youth who flinches at the taste. By evening there will be little trade salt for a quick repair, salt for a strap mended with better thread than you have, salt for a spoonful of clarified fat that will put a tender shine back into a tired thong. For now it rides, square and patient. The rumor that has walked beside you tries on a new cloak. It learns the word wait in a different accent. The traders repeat a story your people know from another side. Not the hands that forgot to close, but the mouths of scales that learned to sing when dust slid into their pans like a tame wind. A man at your elbow adds that even generous coins learn humility when licked by salt. You allow the remark its smile and return to your counting. Where the track narrows between two modest ridges, you angle your camel so broad, faces pass your panniers like ships at a courteous distance. Your staff becomes a quiet tiller. The bell minders listen for the instant when two rhythms threaten to disagree and nudge them back into one sentence. The caravan becomes a braid, your story, their story, and the common thread of the road. The desert seems amused and approves with easier footing. At the first short halt, you look closely at how the salt is dressed. Lashings cross cleanly in 4s and 6s, never in fussy 3s. A pad of palm ribs sits wherever a corner dreams of biting. Here and there, damp cloth, a trick against chafe and heat, keeps a slab from teaching a rope bad language. A trader tightens a knot with a twist you do not use. He shows you twice, and once more for the way your fingers think. You tie it and feel the small, honest click. Dates go around and return lighter. A handful of roasted grain follows and sounds like fine gravel in the mouth. Agreeable and honest, the animals burp their opinion of new company and then forget they had one. Someone hums the first bar of a market song. Someone else answers with the line that praises shade. The white on every sleeve grows brighter as if to argue with the sky. Back on the move, your eye learns to love rectangles. After an hour, the slabs look less like cargo and more like blocks in a patient wall. You are helping carry from one town to another. You imagine, for the length of a dozen steps, houses raised from this brightness, mortar licking carefully at the edges, a roof that remembers the sea without ever seeing it. You keep the day small by such thoughts, and the day remains small. A trader points to your panniers and asks whether you carry cloth or quiet stones. You answer with the kind of smile that has learned not to become a story. He nods, not unkind, and strokes the white burden with the affection a man reserves for a faithful tool. Between you passes the calm of people who move value without advertising it. His value shows itself and pays for the privilege. Yours prefers modesty. When the path bends toward a shallow where wind collects, the salt line tucks behind yours to keep corners from learning you the hard way. You take the front and let your bells speak for both companies for a watch. The sound changes slightly fuller, as if a second voice were singing the same notes under yours. You adjust nothing. You walk and let the tune hold. By late morning, the light has begun its slow hammering. White throws it back with enthusiasm, and the world grows brighter without growing kinder. You pull your veil down and knot it with 2 sure turns. The salt men do the same. The ground warms under sandals. The camels lower their heads and reduce unnecessary opinions. No one suggests haste. The slabs prefer equality. They do not care who leads, only that the pace remains civilized. When the sign comes for midday shade, you feel it before you see it. The whole joined caravan easing a collective breath, as if a narrow door has opened into a courtyard. You unfasten a strap that had thoughts of arguing, rub a thumb of fat along a place where rope spoke too loudly, and shake a little white from your sleeve onto the ground, so the desert may season itself. The traders spread their mats near yours without asking, because this road teaches the same gentle manners to everyone. You will share water wisdom and thorn stories and repair tricks. They will share a pinch of the clean brightness that makes food tell the truth. Later, perhaps a measure of your plain riding cloth will find its way under a troublesome corner on one of their loads. Nothing dramatic, nothing for a griot's high shelf, only the ordinary trade of road companions who prefer the day to keep an even voice. The salt camels chew thoughtfully, bells at rest, slabs shining like small captive mornings. The tail whitens the hour and makes even gossip taste honest. Shade gathers under the acacia the way modest people gather quietly, without asking anyone to notice. The tree is not large, but it is steady. Its branches hold their green like a secret. Its thorns make short, decisive arguments, and its crown lays a round tent on the sand that keeps moving, even when no one does. You guide the front animals in first, and let them draw a neat half circle. They fold their knees with the same sigh they use every day when comfort arrives on time. You loosen girths one hole, no more. Loads keep their dignity. A knee rope hums as it settles. A bell forgets its sentence and decides to nap. Someone drifts a mat into the edge of shade and pats it flat. Someone else remembers the small rule. Leave space for feet, for water, for the gossip that always comes with noon and never pays rent. You sit where the sand is still cool, under the top layer, and make peace with the sun by refusing to argue. Dates go around first because dates always know what to do. They knock politely against the clay bowl, each sticky with yesterday's sweetness and dust that has learned to behave. You choose one with a tear in its skin, a little window into the brown. Teeth meet soft grain, then the neat stone. The taste is old, deliberate, and patient. The boy pretends to count pits. He loses count at 6 and starts again, happy to be wrong. A skin of sour milk passes as if it belongs to the shade. It does. The mouth is brass and smells faintly of smoke and sheep. You tilt it carefully and let a small curl of white visit the wooden cup. Foam rims the edge and keeps its own counsel. You drink, and the world settles into place. The tartness reminds the tongue it lives in a warm country and should be grateful for cool ideas. Someone wipes the mouth with a clean scrap and sets the skin in the shadow's deepest blue. Salt dust has made lace of your sleeve. You brush it, and it goes nowhere. It merely rearranges itself into a different kind of whiteness. You smile at the trick and leave it where it likes to live. The traders sink into their own half of the circle and lay short sticks under the corners of their slabs, so neither rope nor skin will remember noon unkindly. One of them breaks a tiny crystal with his teeth and grins the grin of a man loyal to plain thing. Water skins lift to the lowest branch with short cords, so the breeze can do its honest work. You choose the shoulder knots that forgive quickly, test the give, and make sure no thorn has opinions about leather today. A faint damp darkens the skins. They cool as if remembering the patience of night. Beside them you set a small cloth parcel with tea. You will not brew until evening, because the day has enough heat without your help. Flies glow like chips of glass and circle ambitions larger than their wings. A palm frond makes quiet weather when waved lazily. The camel nearest you reaches for a low branch. You steer the mouth away from thorns and toward pods with a gentle tap. The animal receives the correction and pretends it was its idea. Chewing begins, industrious and kind. The bell at its throat shivers once and falls asleep again. The first talk is inventory disguised as courtesy. You name the small repairs accomplished so far. A strap that stopped sulking under oil. A stitch that surrendered to better thread. A wax seal that wanted a fingertip's warmth and got it. A trader shows a knot that tightens when a load settles and loosens with one friendly tug, not magic. Only practice that grew wise. You learn it, repeat it, and agree to forget 3 worse knots to make room. Shadows make neighborhoods. A cup neighborhood here, a sandals neighborhood there. A quiet place where the scribe spreads his folded papers like cool bread to keep them from curling. He plants a short stick in the ground and glances at it without ceremony, the sort of glances that will later become numbers. You let him have his private talk with the sun and keep your attention on the small work that feeds the large work. Rubbing a raw spot with fat, straightening a thong, looking without moving. The boy collects a golden tear of acacia gum with a flat twig. He shows it to you as if he had coaxed a star into his hand. You nod and ask him to line a seam you distrust by afternoon. He nods back, outraged to be trusted. It makes him upright as a tent pole. The gum warms, becomes thoughtful, and smooths itself along the stitches, with the shy shine of good intentions. The tree pays its rent one drop at a time. Someone laughs because someone else has told the same line about rich men and poor sandals. The line survives on the road because it works in all directions. It fits every foot. You let the laughter pass, brief and well-mannered, then let it die. Noon prefers voices that lie down quickly. You eat a second date because the first one made a promise. The pit clicks against your teeth like a small instrument. You plant it beside your heel and call it a future grove without believing yourself. The desert humors you. You pull sandals off and empty a private museum of sand onto the mat. Grains spill in a neat hill and immediately decide to be flat again. The skin of your heel shows the map of the morning. Faint whirls from the straps, a pale line where shade had its say, and the honest red of heat that has worked but not complained. You dust your feet with the cool side of your scarf and feel the day agree to be a fraction lighter. Near the saltmen, a camel has found the exact place where chest and ground become friends. He tucks his legs and becomes one more piece of furniture. The sight relaxes your shoulders in a way no argument can. You rest your back against a pannier that knows you well. Its leather smells like a workshop and a hearth at the same time. Through the lid, you feel the weight you placed there this morning, calm and uninterested in interruption. Good burdens act like sleeping children, heavy, warm, content to be carried later. The shade moves, enlarges, then thins at one edge the way polite guests begin to stand. Mats scoot an arm's length. The water skins sigh a little cooler. The breeze folds and unfolds like a careful letter. You close your eyes for the space of 20 slow breaths and lose nothing, because the caravan keeps watch even when no one tries. Bells lie quiet with their mouths open. The thorns keep unhelpful shapes at a respectful distance. Your own breath writes a small, repeating word that means stay. When you blink the world back into focus, the scribe's stick has a shorter shadow. His paper has more quiet marks. A guide nudges a stake hole with his heel and nods at what he learns there about the day's modest patience. The boy returns the gum twig and asks whether the seam looks proud of itself. It does, but you do not tell it so. You tell the boy, which makes the seam behave. You rinse your hands from the brass-mouthed skin. 3 cautious beats to wake the fingers for tying, and let the last drop roll from nail to knuckle to sand. Sour milk returns to its cool pocket inside a folded cloth. Dates withdraw to the clay bowl to think about their usefulness. Shade thins at the far side and thickens under the bellies of resting beasts, as if the day wishes to remind you where comfort actually lives. You rise without haste. The mat shakes once and releases the story of noon in a soft cloud that does not travel far. Girthing returns to its rightful holes. Bells are touched, not struck. Knots remember their agreements. You leave the tree, a handful of dropped skins and a circle of flatter sand. Payment by evidence rather than coin. The acacia keeps its opinions and its thorns. It will be there another noon for another company that respects small tents of shadow. You take one last slow sip, of friendliness rather than a drink, and set the empty cup upside down. The world beyond the shade is white and certain. You step into it like someone walking from one quiet room to another. Behind you, the shade keeps moving, patient as a teacher, willing to explain noon again to the next listener. You watch the scribe court the sun with tools that look like toys and behave like judges. He plants a thin stick in flattened sand, then strokes the surface with his palm until it agrees to be a page. The stick's shadow stands like a writing he can read. He marks the tip with a pebble, waits the length of a slow date chewed without hurry, then marks the new tip with another pebble. Time, which can be rude, becomes punctual in the space between 2 small stones. He holds his hand above the ground thumb, 2 little fingers spread wide, and measures the gap from the first mark to the second. He calls it a finger of the day and writes a neat line on folded paper. The reed in his hand has a clipped point that whispers against the sheet, a sound that always makes you want to tidy something. He does not scold the sun. He merely notes its manners. A cord, knotted at regular courtesies, lies beside him. He pulls it straight and sets one knot by the stick, then counts the others along the shadow like beads. Each knot remembers a watch. Each watch remembers a task. Walk, drink, tighten, pray, rest, check seals, walk again. The cord is a quiet sermon. You know it by heart even when you forget its words. He sets a small wooden square over the stick's base and peers along the right angle, making sure the pillar stands honest. He rubs a pinch of ash between his fingers and dusts the top so glare keeps its distance. He doesn't say noon. He lets the shadow say smaller. He doesn't say afternoon. He lets the shadow say longer toward the side that needs gentleness. On his knee lies the book of this journey, folded sheets stitched into a modest spine, edges lightly salted by every camp. Columns show tallies that behave, panniers sealed, skins filled, repairs traded, loads moved 1 hole forward after rest. A narrow margin holds private words, wind courteous, sand thoughtful, 1 thorn ambitious. Figures sit as if cooled after baking, crisp at the corners. You ask for the hour without asking. He shifts 2 pebbles into a pattern you both understand, 1 here, 2 there, a space shaped like a breath. You nod, pour water for a cup of silence, and leave him to his fractions. Counting is a kind of shade. It calms the mind as surely as a low branch calms the skin. The boy tries the measuring game with his own stick. Shorter, more enthusiastic. His shadow leaps. His pebbles hurry. The scribe watches, then shows him how to press the base deeper and to wait 2 heartbeats longer than feels proper. Waiting is where numbers become true. The boy accepts the lesson, proud to be slowed. A guide kneels, draws a thin arc with a date palm rib, and places your staff across it like a cord. The angle from staff to shadow agrees with his morning plan, the rib line from the ridge to the thornfield. The pause at the place where the ground confesses. He taps the shadow twice, then the rib once. The marks become a sentence the feet will read without knowing they can read. A breeze tilts the stick, and the scribe's hand catches it without the drama of rescue. Only the unremarkable care of someone who knows the value of straight things. He smooths the sand again, and the world's writing resumes where it left off. The shadow's tip edges away, tiny, patient. He notes it with a dot no bigger than a seed. He opens a brass-cased instrument, no larger than a biscuit, a line, and weight beneath a ring. The string steadies. The weight points at the idea of down that never changes. He sets the case by the stick, not to slave the sun to brass, only to confirm the common language. The weight argues for vertical. The stick agrees. He closes the case with a click that implies friendship. When he pauses, he rubs his reed against a bit of cloth to clean the nib and moistens it with the smallest kiss of water from a fingertip. It is a priestly gesture with no temple but order. He tests the point on his thumbnail. It leaves a whispering crescent. Satisfied, he drafts a neat row of small circles on the day's page. Each circle a packet measured. Each packet already a memory traveling quietly under leather. Around you, the shade migrates like a flock. Mats slip a little. Voices shrink to mutters. A camel exhales a long sigh that the scribe writes without ink by the tilt of his head. 1 more quarter watch of kindness before we ask for standing. He dots that, too unseen but understood. At last he closes the book and ties it with a strap soft from being useful. He plants the stick again, not because the sun requires it, but because the next hour will want a friend to lean on. The 2 pebbles sit side by side like thoughts that have agreed to share a cup. He gathers the cord and slips it into the book's spine so the knots keep company with the numbers. You thank him with the only currency he likes, placing a small, even stone on the corner of the page to keep it from chasing the breeze. He smiles from the eyes and returns to silence. The sun continues its slow negotiation with shadows. The shadow continues its patient answer. You rise to prepare the prayer mat that will measure the next few breaths in another kind of arithmetic. You rinse your hands with the water that keeps a special mouth brass cool, a polite weight in the palm. The trickle runs over wrists and off fingertips, disappears into sand that does not complain. You do not rush the 3 motions. They are not for showing. They are for remembering. Somewhere a bell forgets a note, and then finds it again, as if to clear its throat for quiet. Cloth unrolls on the sand, like a small river deciding where to lie. The weave shows the path of hands that made it warp steady, weft patient. You lay it toward the same place you lay it every day. Eyes check the line, but the body has known longer than the eyes. The ground is level enough that the forehead will meet it evenly. You test with a palm, and the sand answers with the softness of a bed turned down. Around you, other rectangles appear, color answering color, pattern agreeing to be less than its own beauty for a few breaths. Words begin, low and private. The first line not so much spoken as aloud. You stand, lift, fold, lower each movement, a practice in gentleness with joints and with thoughts. The spine learns humility without feeling scolded. The knees find old familiarity where they meet earth. The voice ahead carries the measure, not as a command, as a suggestion that the breath accepts. A line about mercy that does not grow tired. A line about a path that does not ask for applause. A line that turns the head away from sums and toward the small, bright space between 2 heartbeats. You recite what you own and borrow the rest with intention clean as water. When your forehead meets the mat, The world becomes the smell of fiber warmed by the day. It smells like quiet rooms, like patient hands rinsed in a courtyard, like shade turned into cloth. The place between heartbeat and sand feels wide enough for a caravan, not in order to carry worldly things. Those are tied and balanced and checked. It feels large enough to carry the desire not to bruise what you cannot see. You rise slow as a cup filling. Dust does not complain. The sky remembers to be wide again. You keep your gaze short, because long gazes make pride talkative. Pride is thirsty and does not help with loads. A fly writes a tiny letter by your cheek and leaves. You let it pass unread. In the second bow, your shoulders drop the last of noon. In the final sitting, your hands rest in your lap, boat-shaped, ready to hold whatever small kindness the next watch offers. Words near their end. The voice releases you as if it had been holding a door. You remain a breath longer, because leaving in a hurry makes even good things nervous. Around you, mats lift with small sighs, edges shaken of sand that will return later anyway. Cloths fold along familiar lines. A murmur moves where a chant moved, then fades. The scribe ties his reed with a bit of thread, as if prayer had reminded him to be kinder to tools. The guides do not speak. Their silence feels deliberate and bright. A man beside you presses his forehead to the sand once more, unscripted, as if to mark the day with a small private seal. You look away in order to respect the moment. Privacy on the road is a thin cloth you hold up for each other. You are glad for it. When he rises, you pretend you are thinking about straps. You roll your mat and slide it into its sleeve, not tight. Cloth hates tightness. It hardens like a scolded heart. You dust the place where your knees were and smooth it with the side of your hand. Someone will pass here and feel better for not knowing why. A child claps once and is hushed by a mother's glance that carries love inside the hush. The child leans into the glance and becomes quiet for reasons he will not remember but will keep. The first practical thought after prayer is not a wonderful thought. It is a necessary one. Water. You lift the marked skin for ritual and set it apart from thirst skins. The difference between them is only intention and restraint, which in the desert are worth as much as iron. You touch the brass mouth with a fingernail to be sure it sits well, then tuck it under a fold of cloth in the pannier's shade. You tie your scarf. Knot. Tuck. Patience. Sand has been polite since morning. It may turn opinionated by afternoon. You prefer to be ready before opinion arrives. A guide sets a staff where the first step after prayer will fall. It points not north, not south, but toward a line the ribs drew while the shadow spoke with pebbles. The staff's shadow nods agreement, and you accept instruction from wood. Before you stand fully, you thank the small square of ground aloud in a voice too low for anyone to hear. The thanks takes the size of a single breath. It is enough. You shoulder your ordinary tasks, bells, straps, skins, seals, and find them lighter by an amount that will not show on a scale. The caravan begins to touch its knots, to pull threads through holes, to test the courtesy of leather with thumbs. Prayer folds itself into the work and keeps walking. Loads have opinions after rest. Your job is to listen without letting them run the camp. You start with the animal, whose shadow shows a small tilt. One hole tighter on the near girth, you think, and the pannier will stop whispering complaints to the saddle tree. You set your palm under the strap, 2 fingers clearing, the old measure that keeps breath and burden in good conversation. Leather talks in vowels when you draw it through. Ah, when it loosens. A, when it finds the right notch. A satisfied millimeter when the tongue of the buckle seats. You pull only as far as dignity allows. A camel's ribs are not a drum. You pat the hair flat so the strap will remember kindness as long as it remembers duty. The animal turns his head and blinks as if the idea were his. You agree. You check the pair opposite. Panniers must speak to each other. You lean a shoulder to the right bag and feel the reply under your bone. A firm hello, not a sleepy one. The left bag answers with the same tone. Good. You slide 2 fingers under the cross strap and test for chafe. A smear of fat quiets what the day might turn into a story. A small cloth pad slips between strap and edge where corners plan mischief. Plans are welcome. Mischief is not. At the second animal, a decoy sack of millet has crept forward, an eager guest reaching for the front seat. You nudge it back and lay a straight stick beneath the thong so ambition rides on wood, not on hide. The stick creaks approval. The thong changes its mind about sawing. You nod to yourself, and let the knot remember it is a knot. Wax seals, small moons caught in daylight, get a brief audience. You touch each with your smallest nail, not to break their silence, only to feel the polish that means they slept undisturbed. Where a bead looks proud, you borrow a fingertip of dust and dim its vanity. Wealth travels safest when it does not admire itself. The boy has carried out the gum twig and the oil stone before you asked. He hovers at your left like a polite question. You hand him the thong that mutters and tell him to smooth it with oil until it learns softer words. He works the circles slow, pleased that oil disappears into leather, the way a good lesson goes into a head. He glances at you and you say nothing, which is a way of saying you approve. You shorten one bell strap by a hole and lengthen its neighbor. The choir will balance better if the proud bell minds the modest one. The cracked bell you watch closely. If it begins to speak with two tongues instead of one, you will retire it to the dusk edge, where it can call tea without carrying burdens. For now, the hairline calls harmony. Leave it where time can teach it a little more. When you come to the fourth camel, you find a stitch that paid too much attention to the sun. The thread has turned brittle, the knot vain. You pick it out with a thorn, steady as a surgeon, and sew a new line with short, brave bites. The leather accepts the needle like a quiet apology. You rub the seam with a touch of fat and teach it a softer memory. The scribe arrives with his calm pocket of numbers. He reads weights as you shift them. He says little aloud, but the pencil taps once when you make the change he preferred. A ledger's gratitude is that tap. You take it and feel the day come into truer balance. A caravan that agrees with its book walks as if it has slept well. You hoist the near pannier 2 finger widths higher, not 3. 3 tempts pride, and pride slips by noon. 2 makes the right line along the flank, the line you look for without thinking. The camel blows warm breath along your sleeve, the thank you he offers when words would be excessive. You scratch the notch under the jaw, and both of you return to your tasks with easier spines. The guides pass like wind, watching hands more than straps. One stops your fingers just before you tie a half hitch where a bow will forgive faster. He shows with his own fingers loop, fold, pull, keep the tail friendly. You repeat and feel the knot settle like a good sentence finally found. The guide's eyes smile. His veil stays composed. He moves on, correcting nothing else, which is the compliment you prefer. At the last animal, a water skin leans towards sun it does not need. You flip it to the shade side and shorten the lash that wanted to tell a long story. Shoulder knots, twin turns, square to release. You tug the safety thread. It sits ready to be kind later. A breath of wind tastes the leather and approves. When you step back, the line holds itself like a well-made shelf. Not proud, but unquestionable. You feel the change first in your body. The tiny corrections at ankle and hip that will not be asked to work so hard. You feel it next in the sound bells, less argumentative, hooves less surprised by their tasks. You will feel it last with the sun less heat wasted against unnecessary friction. The desert does not applaud good rigging. It simply allows you to pass. You dust your hands together and taste salt on your lip, clean and familiar. The boy shows you the thong, now quiet and supple. You press it with a fingertip and leave a small crescent. He beams at the proof you have given him, then hides the beam as if it might scare away luck. You tie the last knot, palm the last strap, and step aside so the caravan can remember how to be one thing again. The oasis announces itself by scent before sight. The cool green bitter of palm, the shy sweetness of water that has practiced patience underground. Heat softens a fraction. The bell's tone rounds as if a cushion had been placed beneath it. When the crowns appear ragged, upright, a congregation of good intentions, the animals lengthen their necks and do not pretend not to notice. You approach with the manners the place deserves. No shouting, no hurry, no long faces. The first bucket comes up slow, hand over hand. The rope accepted, not conquered. Wood talks softly against the mouth of the well. When the bucket clears the stone, you pause so the rope can unwind its little anger. Then the bucket sets down on sand and the world smells like ancient pottery and shade. You pour with 2 hands and no flourish, Into the shallow trough rubbed smooth by years of muzzle and lip. The first mouth is not a person's. The first mouth belongs to the beast that carried most without complaint. He drinks with a sound like a line of beads sliding over cloth. He pauses, tilts, resumes. You watch for greed and do not see it. You learn from his breath when to pull the bucket again. A boy kneels with a palm frond to sweep grit away from the wet edge, so each new mouth meets clean water. You guide him not with words, but with the angle of your own hands. He learns quickly. The oasis has more teachers than you do. A trader lays a flat stone under one corner of a slab to keep it from remembering the softness as a reason to slip later. Everyone behaves as if a small temple has requested good shoes. When your turn comes, you drink from a cup that smells of smoke and brass. The water is shy at first touch, then confident in the throat. You hold it in your mouth like a visitor you are reluctant to send away. It will leave anyway. Bodies are generous with what they most need. You pour a second cup over wrists and along a line behind the ears. The skin thanks you without needing language. Palm shade is different from acacia shade. It dappled and moving. A conversation of shapes that refuses to decide. The ground here is patterned with older puddles, the memory of yesterday's circles drying toward their centers. Children somewhere argue in voices that are serious because their matters matter, which is to say, sticks, a beetle, a game with rules invented this morning. The sound does not travel far. The palms keep secrets kindly. You check the stones that protect the well's lip, feeling for looseness with your knuckles. One shifts. You call for the man whose duty lives here. He answers with a nod and brings a wedge and a hammer that seems too small until it works. The stone returns to the discipline of the ring. He accepts a measure of salt with an expression that says, "Exchange makes the day less lonely." Ropes get turned end for end where they have rubbed, as a favor to the future. Buckets rest with their mouths down so the sun can talk them dry. A skin of water, marked for rinsing and prayer, hangs in the long palm shade where the breeze behaves best. You add a twist of cloth under its shoulder cord where a thorn once offered an opinion. You walk to the palm whose lower trunk carries little scars old spades cut. New ones forming. The dates high above are not yours yet, but their smell already leans towards sweetness. A child points to a woven collar nested near the crown. It will keep fruit from bruising its own weight when the time comes. You praise a tool that protects without boasting. The child nods as if you had named a cousin. While others drink, you listen to the bucket tell its round story over and over. Rope, dark, cool, light, lip, pour, rest. The rhythm slows thought until only necessary items remain. A guide shows you where to stop animals, so the approach hardens. Not muddies one watch of kindness, now saves 2 watches of trouble when you return. You mark the line with a small cairn of 3 stones and the memory of a smell. Before leaving, you pay the oasis in 3 coins that are not coins. You leave the trough cleaner than you found it. You smooth the sand where spillage might invite flies to a dream of impudence. And you keep silence for 1 full minute, a stillness that allows the place to measure you as you measured it. The palms approve by not moving. On the path back to the line, the camels carry water in their long insides, with less ceremony than humans give the same. Their faces look like sermons ending kindly. You feel the bell in your chest take up its note again, deeper by a finger. The sun continues, no less itself for your visit to shade, and you do not ask it to be otherwise. The buckets rest, the rope relaxes into familiar coils, and your palms remember coolness long enough to season the afternoon. The well's talk lingers in people longer than in buckets. Names begin to trade places like spices on a cloth, Cairo folded into Timbuktu, Mecca tucked under Walata, Janneh placed beside places you have not yet learned to carry on the tongue. Gossip fattens in shade. At the well, it wears its best clothes and pretends it has been fasting. You stand where breeze and listening meet. A trader tells how a ledger in a far market learned to sing when dust met its plates, weights clicked like polite castanets. Even scales smiled. Another says a pilgrim of soft hands kneeled where ordinary men kneel and left a path smoothed by generosity. A third insists that gifts pour best when the giver forgets to keep count. You have heard the song in other keys. It still walks well. A teacher with ink stains along his cuticle drinks and then lowers his voice to the level of books. He speaks of a stipend promised for boys who can ride words farther than camels, of a small endowment like a clay jar buried at the base of a wall. He names no patron, offers no sum, only a schedule tied to the moon. You watch his eyes. They do not beg. They set a table. You make a quiet place in your mind where such news can sit until it either grows or goes. The boy from your line listens with his whole face. He asks whether learning to measure a shadow counts as writing words. The teacher smiles without seeing him and answers another man. But the answer fits the boy anyway. The first line you learn should be the one you can draw every day. The boy touches the brim of the well with respect, as if it were a page. Women from a nearby garden bring gourds to fill and talk about rope the way traders talk about coin. Fraying here, new twist there, a knot that forgives wet fingers. They exchange a recipe for coaxing softness back into leather olive pits. A little ash, patient hands. You store it next to other recipes, for trust, for silence, for making a bell speak kindly with a thread of cloth. The saltmen add histories of pits turning fickle, of wind changing habits, of a path across bare flats that grew a thornfield, while no one watched. Their maps draw themselves with palm movements. Their measures are the distance between two old songs. You nod where nodding is payment. You add a story about a pad beneath a sharp slab that saved a morning from becoming a memory of skin. They nod back, and both of you feel paid. Someone mentions a caravan overtaken by drums no threat, only news moving faster than feet. The drums counted a new levy by a gate where sweepers begin before dawn. Someone else contradicts the gate and corrects the levy by a smaller number said twice. Numbers in shade behave like cats. They sit in the lap of the voice that strokes them best. You pet none of them. You let them decide whose lap to choose and keep your hands for ropes. A young man tells the generous king's story with too many attendants. You remove 3 with a look you do not send at him, only at the sand near your foot. A woman adds a verse about a courtyard that swept itself, because sweeping the courtyard of such a guest would be presumptuous. This you keep. It tastes true. The scribe's reed scratches figures no one requested. How many measures poured into how many cups, how many mouths waited, and how many no longer do. He does not lift his eyes. He is not counting to own. He is counting to remember. Counting at the well is a form of gratitude that does not make a speech. You trade a square of woven cloth for a pinch of bright salt and tuck it into your pouch, not for selling later, but to remind your tongue to keep telling the truth when the day grows long. The man who gives it to you asks nothing in return besides a story about a knot you tie that loosens with one tug. You show him on a palm rib. He shows someone else before you finish. Gossip is only a knot tied in voices. As people move away, news thins to threads and then to single strands. The teacher sits in the low throat of shade and writes 3 words on a small slip. He dampens the ink with breath and dries it with the back of his hand. Then he folds the paper into a square that will fit beneath a nail and gives it to a boy not yours. The boy holds it as if it were a seed he must ferry through wind. Perhaps it is. The well resumes its routine rope, wood, lip, pour. You listen one last time for rumors that matter, and hear only the kind that do not hurt the road. You leave the shade as if getting up from a mat you were invited to use. Your animals turn their heads toward the path with a wisdom that requires no chatter. Bells lift their sentences where they dropped them. Story sits behind you in coolness, content to wait for the next noon. Night returns a teacher with patient hands, and you meet it with a face washed by wind and a mind tidied by work. The first stars arrive like shy students slipping into a low room. You already know where to look above the dark shoulder of the dune, where air cools first. Along the seam where black meets a softer black, a guide lifts his chin, and the caravan slows a finger's width, not to stop, only to let learning take its seat. You stand with your staff planted, thumb on the smooth place where other nights have polished certainty. A veil softens breath. Sand keeps counsel. The guide names 2 points, with one careful finger, one that keeps your path true when dawn forgets its line, and another that rises earlier this month, a punctual friend. He does not sing their names. He lets the positions speak. Stars prefer modest introductions. He draws a shape on the sky with small motions, joining bright grain to bright grain, until a road appears you cannot walk with feet. You trace it in your palm with the nail of your smallest finger, making a quiet map you can carry without paper. The boy copies the gesture, and you do not correct him when his lines wander. Wandering is how a hand learns to arrive, far off. A faint silver wakes, not dawn, only the river of scattered light that remembers every fire from every camp. The animals breathe at an even pace, pleased that the heat has released its lecture. Leather cools, bells speak softer words, and the panniers feel heavier in number rather than weight. You let the counting match the bell until thought wears slippers. A guide kneels and presses a date palm rib into firm sand. He writes the night's plan: 2 ridges, a hollow where air pools, a wind that has promised to be kind. He lays your staff across his signs to teach your body the angles. Shoulder, wrist, shoulder again. A breath at each corner moves knowledge from eyes into bones. Stars are not for staring. They are for wearing like a cloak. You tilt your head back and steal 2 new names you have heard but not owned. The syllables are smooth as oiled wood. You roll them once and put them away. Names matter less than habits. Look, measure, confirm with breath, walk. Still, a name can keep you company when the ground grows featureless. You keep these 2 because they sit quietly in the mouth. The path sets off again at a pace that would not slosh a shallow cup. Hooves purr against cooled crust. The bell marks each step with a word that has forgotten its sharpness. You fall in behind yesterday's logic and tonight's instruction, comfortable with the way they share the load. Rumor wanders to the back. Stars will carry it harmlessly. When you raise your eyes for the next check, you find the pair where you left them, one a touch lower, one keeping its post. The guide does not look upward now. He looks at shoulders, hands, bell, animals' ears. The sky's music enters the body like smoke in cloth. If the body keeps time, the caravan will hum the tune until ground delivers its verse. At the hour when tents would be folded if you were in camp, the stars begin to tilt their advice toward rest. The guides pinch the air to say one more watch. A watch and a hand and a breath. You do not argue. You pace your water. Lower your eyes as much as you lift them. Loosen a strap that thought about pride. The animals give a long groan like a wooden door closing. Before you halt, you kneel and press both palms to the sand. The night has been kind. You answer with attention. A grain sticks to each fingertip. Tiny constellations you did not earn but will wear until you shake your hands clean. The boy points at the bright teacher that stood the watch. He does not ask its name now. He has a better question forming the kind answered by distance, walked without surprise. You spread the mat where the wind keeps still. The bell's mouth faces down. A skin of water hangs in the dark like a moon you can reach. Stars take one step and another and begin their retreat. You thank them without words and sleep with your head arranged toward the next good decision. You wake to a day wearing its own veil. The sun is present but uninterested in introductions. Light arrives without edges, and the air tastes of flour sifted again. Haze stands where distance used to be. You begin the small work that keeps a soft day from inventing sharpness. You draw the cloth across your mouth and nose, and give it the notch your hands trust 2 turns, a tuck, room to breathe without letting the wind borrow too much. The boy copies you, makes the knot too proud, and unlearns it with a grin. The guides pull their veils higher, eyes narrowed to a useful seam. No one says dust. The dust says itself and keeps talking. Bells sound half a step further away, and hooves write broader crescents that fill quickly. Leather grows talkative. Straps remember complaints they had set aside. You rub a thumb of fat along the thong that wants to argue, and hear it moderate its voice. You shorten one bell strap, lengthen another, and the choir behaves. Sand rises, not as a wall, as a habit grains lifting, deciding nothing, settling again in places the wind prefers. The world becomes a room of curtains. You walk in a closer rhythm, saving opinion for later. The bell softens. The lead camel lowers his head. You keep your gaze a sling's throw, no farther. Farther is for clearer days. The guides use a language of hands you could read in sleep. A palm lifted, narrow line. 2 fingers opening, widen here. A thumb pointing to the lee. Take the gentler face. They never point high. The ground is the book, and the page must be turned with care. Your staff finds its dots by sound tap tap. Softer taps still the cadence that marries temper to distance. Water is for mouths and for cloth. You moisten your veil sparingly and feel the air lose impatience. You do the same to the boy's scarf and watch his shoulders ease. The animal nearest you snorts, sneezes a small story into the wind, and forgives. You pat the neck, and the bell, pleased by even this, rounds its sentence another degree. Hayes edits rumor and pride. Stories travel 3 backs and give up on embroidery. That is mercy. Work does not need ornament when the air contains enough. The talk that survives is practical. A thorn 2 watches ahead has moved. The gravel run after the acacia has broadened. A shallow is holding a little more softness than last season. You store the news where feet keep plans. At a lull, you brush grit from the eye of a needle. The act calms you like sweeping a floor. The scribe tightens the thong around his folded papers and hides them. Ink loves clarity. The guide who laughs seldom laughs, then stops. Signal that the drift is acceptable. The caravan breathes in shorter phrases. You mark time by the scarf's weight and the bell when dust thickens. Every 50 steps, you pinch the strap. Chafe invents stories. You count skins by touch, the way fingers know beads without seeing them. Numbers become a narrow bridge, good enough for today. When gusts gather, you turn the line a quarter and let wind glance off. The boy learns the difference between stubborn and steady. You praise the second. With a nod, he will remember. You adjust pace, so no foot argues with sand more than necessary. Arguing with sand is like explaining a joke to a stone. Save breath for water and for small prayers that do not need witnesses. By midwatch, the haze stands gentler. Shapes return first the close shoulder of a dune, then a thorn, then a memory of the ridge you meant to approach. You resist the eager step and keep the step you chose earlier. Eagerness spends water. Patience spends time, which returns with interest at the next shade when the wind finally rests. There is no applause. The sky simply remembers depth. You loosen the knot of finger, lift the veil to drink, and put it back before the world recalls its tricks. The bell resumes its familiar word. The camels stretch their necks as if they have been released from a polite lesson. You brush grit from your sleeve and leave the rest. You will carry a little of this morning for an hour and then forget. You thank the wind for its lesson and promise to walk softer through the afternoon. The animals agree by chewing and blinking at the calmer sky. You look back once. Your path is a paragraph rewritten 5 times. It reads the same. That is the point. Sound reaches across the flats like a polite hand, asking to join the work. You pause your staff a finger above the sand skin and listen. The first beat is distant. The second agrees with it. The third waits a respectful breath before following. Drums walk better than voices when air stands heavy. The guides tilt their heads, count without counting, and your bell settles closer to that rhythm. The boy hears it and grins, then looks to you to make sure grinning is allowed. It is allowed. A caravan playing its miles on skins is not a threat. It is news moving at the pace of patience. You count the spaces between beats, then count again when wind steals one. The pattern resolves into a friendly measure 4 long, 2 short, a rest. You slow the line by the width of a good thought. The bell rounds its word once. Sand accepts the small change like a host making room at a low table. Someone hums the first notes of the refrain the griot kept back last night, as if the road had decided to sing his verse. You give the pannier near your knee a reassuring pat. It does not need to join the choir. On the horizon, a darker stitch rises and lengthens. The drums grow shoulders. Their line slides along yours at a distance both careful and companionable, like 2 boats on a broad river neither owns. The players sit high, hands easy, wrists remembering what to do from earlier lifetimes. A lead hand signals a question. Share the road for a watch? Your bell answers yes by staying itself. Drumskin speaks to copper. Copper answers in the even language it prefers. The combined sound steadies the ground. Feet take confidence from pulse and return it. The guides adjust a finger's worth of angle so both lines breathe well. You watch for corners and straps tempted by elbows. The boy watches faces and tries to count smiles. There are more than expected. Between beats, bits of talk jump the space. How many days from the thornfield? Whether the generous well is still generous. If a ridge has grown stingy since last season. No theatrics, no prices, only sand and custom. One man taps a smaller drum with 3 fingers, a ripple that asks where shade will be kind later. A guide answers with his chin, and the man tilts his drum in thanks. You learn a trick. Damp cloth under the rim softens the voice and carries further. The player demonstrates in 2 strokes, then wipes the rim and returns to his usual tone. You sharpen a bell's harmony by sliding its thong 1 knot along the collar. The change settles the measure like a stone under a pot. No one remarks. Better work speaks for itself. When the track narrows, drums lift to a lighter beat, and bells step a thinner line. The 2 strings braid and unbraid without touching. Your staff taps the old dots, and the boy mimics the drum with lips and tongue. Very quietly, learning rhythm can live behind the teeth. He will keep it there for the mile when work feels heavier than it deserves. The sun climbs and heat stretches sound, but the measure holds. A cracked bell near the rear adds a faint second note that sits well beneath the drum's round talk. You think of the griot's words on generosity walking better than coins. Today, generosity is a tempo offered and accepted. Not faster, not slower, just enough to make distance step forward. At the break, you stop on higher ground, where wind still has opinions. Drums hush with a palm, and bells turn their mouths down. Someone trades a strip of oilcloth for a thumb of fat. Someone else shows a repair, and is thanked by being ignored the highest praise for a fix that will not need remembering. You share 2 dates across the space. The dates travel like good news, sticky and sure. When you part, the measure ends without drama. The other line drifts toward its own appointment with shade. Your bell resumes duty, but your steps keep the drums like a second heart. The boy tries the pattern under his breath, drops it once, finds it again, and looks embarrassed for no reason. You tell him a road is practice, and practice is kindness to time. The sound fades, then returns once as if to wave, and then disappears into silence that remembers music. Gently, you arrive under a mud brick arch, while the night still holds its last thread. The gate has a memory for footsteps and the exact patience of those who come before light. Sweepers have already drawn curved brooms across the ground, making brown waves that break against the threshold and disappear. The air smells of ash cooled on stone and of bread, thinking about rising. You slow the line and let the bell say a smaller word. Animals fold, panniers sit like polite guests. The city has not fully put on its face, but its bones are awake. A lantern tilts, a hand tests the wick, and decides morning can proceed. You step aside for a basket of greens glistening with the last dark, and your sleeve catches 1 cold drop. The sweepers work without looking at you. Their brooms move with a rhythm that suits everybody. A child runs ahead and makes the first impudent prints. A broom removes them gently. The wooden leaves breathe where iron holds them. The hinges carry yesterday's oil, as if it were a pride modest enough to pass inspection. Stalls prepare their quiet grammar. A cloth is thrown, then smoothed with the back of a hand. A scale is set on a board, and rocks once to find its center. A bundle becomes a stack in 3 moves. A seller lifts a jar and tests its mouth with a knuckle, listening for a ring that admits no crack. You like the sound because it belongs to work that will soon forget itself. You count your animals again, then count calm again. The second number is shorter today. You have done this gate before. You will do others. They ask the same manners and teach the same lesson. Enter as if the place belongs to its people and not to your business. A guard with a spear near his elbow watches nobody and therefore everyone. He lifts his brows, not to question. To confirm that the morning is behaving, a woman washes a corner of stone with 3 careful pours, reclaiming a seat. Water spreads a brief mirror of the arch in the sky, then retreats, leaving coolness. A cat walks through the mirror, then lifts its tail. You shift 1 pannier to keep the weight honest. The animal blows warm air and accepts the correction as if you had just told a better story. Spice sellers lift lids for their own noses, share a pinch with a neighbor who clicks his tongue and adjusts a price. An old man cleans a knife with his palm and a rag, and draws its edge against his thumb in a gesture that is memory rather than test. He sees you see him and smiles, because steel enjoys attention from eyes. You nod, because attention is cheap and valuable at once. When the gate creaks wider, people slip through, with the courtesy of old rules. The line advances and settles. You offer the ledgerman what he expects, a word, not a speech, a look that says you will be no trouble, which is different from saying you can be none. He accepts both and writes a tiny sign on a page. In its small way, the market has welcomed you. From deeper streets, a donkey arrives with baskets that smell of wet rope and fennel seeds. From above, a balcony coughs up a rug, then retracts it. Dust can wait. Somewhere a shutter clicks shut, then opens again. The sound of waking is not a song. It is a series of agreements. Bells barely speak. Drums keep silence. Even rumor keeps its hands behind its back near a gate. You breathe shallow out of respect for other chores unfolding. A boy, with a pot of red paste, marks a number on a wall already full of friendly arithmetic. You prefer not to know the sum. The guard shifts his weight and finds the stance he will wear until noon. The breeze from the arch says inside is cooler than out. You do not hurry to collect it. When your turn stands in front of the hinge, you lead the first animal through the throat of the gate and feel the city accept the weight. Hooves go from sand to surface that remembers wheels. Your bell speaks once, grateful and brief. Inside, the street lies like a clean page waiting for neat handwriting from many hands. Behind you, the hinge gives one last soft breath, and ahead a broom finishes its stroke, leaving an arc of quiet for your first step. You find the weighers before the crowd finds its voice. At a bench that has learned to hold still while coins pretend to dance. The balance sits in the middle like a mild judge beam straight, tongue clean, pans polished by years of polite arguments. The man who owns it keeps his thumb where it cannot be accused of friendship. He breathes when the tongue breathes, and waits when it waits. You like his style. He lays out his small brass family. Seeds of weight nested in a wooden tray. Each round head rubbed bright where fingers call their names. 1, 2, 4, 8. The cousins who never quarrel when kept apart. He taps a pan so dust will remember to leave, then lowers a counterweight with a tenderness that works as quickly as force and lasts longer. The tongue inclines, considers, returns to center the way a well-raised child returns to a chair. A customer brings a twist of something brown and bitter. Cola parades its virtue as if it were born to recitations. The seller speaks the names of journeys, the buyer answers with distances in coin, and the scale keeps the peace by insisting on numbers no voice can compel to be prettier. You watch the little weights kiss the plate, each a polite greeting, never a slap. The scribe beside the bench writes neat lines that do not rush. His reed agrees with the day. You place your own business on the periphery, where modest loads prefer to be seen without being seen. A strap, a stitch, a thong that needs better manners. Cloth folded to a span, traded for copper rings that will serve as tools before they ever dream of wrists. The weigher looks at your goods with eyes that weigh without a beam. He gives you a number, you nod. The scribe draws a figure. The figure looks like it has always lived there. Saltmen arrive with a slab corner to buy calm for a restless knot. They pay in clean glitter cut to the size of agreement. The slab is leaned against the bench. A pad is shown. A knot is taught by hands that have taught it for longer than rumor has walked. The scale watches, impartial and satisfied that order wears many belts. A woman tests a pan with her own coin to remind the day she has seen too many mornings to be charmed by brass. The pan rings true. She smiles without leaking triumph. The weigher tips his tray and returns a small weight to its brothers with a tap that has more respect than apology. The scribe copies a sum to a second page. Because a single memory can be a mischievous servant, you lay a square of linen on the bench for a thread count that says yes to the next journey. Then fold it into a parcel the size of a palm. The weigher's eyebrow asks whether you prefer coin or copper. Copper today. Coin is noisy. He counts rings with a grace that turns counting into courtesy. The scribe notes the trade in a column that welcomes small things for the dignity they bring to large ones. Across the lane, a boy holds up a string of shells and tries to teach them the language of weights by making them clack like cousins. No one scolds him. He will learn by the way sellers ignore what does not balance and praise what does. The weigher flicks a glance that asks the mother to teach the boy the word later. The mother flicks a glance that says he is learning already. A man arrives with a packet tied in wax. He does not open it. He only asks the beam to confirm that its sleep has not grown heavier without consent. The weights step up one by one and decline to be surprised. The tongue stands in the middle and keeps its manners. The scribe writes a small circle beside a small number and underlines neither. You feel your shoulder relax the way it does when a knot remembers its training. Before you leave, you bless the bench with a breath that lifts the last powder from the pan you used. The waiter nods as if you had used the right word in a polite language. The scribe smooths his page with the side of his hand, leaving a sheen no sand can claim. You tuck the copper where it will ride humbly and step back into the street's broader sentence. Behind you, the scale makes a tiny sound like a door closing on good terms. Trade begins as a conversation between fabrics. You offer a fold of cloth the color of baked earth tight weave, honest weight, edges hemmed by a needle that does not show off. The stall keeper touches it with 2 fingers, as if reading a quiet book. He turns it once, twice, and lays it beside a length of blue that pretends to be sky. He smiles at the contrast and asks, without asking, what the cloth is meant to remember. Shade, you say. He nods, and the price softens. Cola sits in neat twists like a sleep snake's, red-brown and stern. The nuts smell faintly of medicine and late talk. You take 2 for a guide who keeps sleep from forgetting its manners. In return, you lay down a small coil of cord and a promise to bring better thread on the next visit. The seller breaks 1 nut to show you the crisp break of good bitterness. You accept the taste the way you accept a lesson, without pretending to like it more than you do. Copper trinkets wink from a tray, a handful of rings, a stamped disc with a hole ready for a thong, little bells that will never be asked to lead but will enjoy following. You test a ring seam with a nail. It holds. The seller tells you that copper remembers a pot from last year. You tell him memory will help it behave on a strap. He laughs and lowers the figure by the amount of a small kindness. Your hand stops at a basket of needles, their eyes gleaming like the promise of mended things. You trade for 3, because 3 is the number that keeps a camp from borrowing trouble. A spool of thread sits beside them, wound with a patience that convinces even bad cloth it wants to be good cloth. You add it to the needles and feel the day agree to be less dramatic. A boy appears with a string of carved nuts painted in faded colors. They look like stories trying to be beads. He asks too much and then half again. You buy none and give him a knot you learned this morning, the kind that tightens when a load leans and loosens with 1 tug. He ties it once badly and once well, then runs to show someone who will think he learned it alone. This is a fair trade. You lift a small mallet meant for pegs and test its weight in your palm. The wood has been rubbed to friendliness by other hands. The head wears a ring of copper that keeps it from remembering its own weakness. You agree on a price that leaves both of you a little proud and neither of you ridiculous. The seller wraps it in paper that used to record another man's figures. The paper crinkles like laughter. At the far end of the lane, a woman sits behind calabashes rubbed with oil until they shine like small moons. One has been made into a bowl with a lip like a thoughtful mouth. You roll its edge along your thumb. It agrees with your skin. She asks for salt. You offer a pinch that smells of the pit, bright and clean. She adds a small spoon the shape of a leaf. You do not refuse the kindness. Refusing kindness makes the road longer. Someone places copper bangles on a rope and sets them swinging so they become brief suns. Children clap and then pretend not to be watching. A trader in sandals tries to learn the bangle song and fails in a way that makes everyone good-humored. You select 2 and hang them not on a wrist but on the rim of a pannier, where they will remind frayed leather to become patient again under oil. You keep your voice level and your gestures small. You praise workmanship like you would praise a steady camel without raising your tone. Where a seller leans toward greed, you lean toward silence. Where a seller leans toward fairness, you lay a little extra salt, as if your hand slipped. The market rewards good posture. When your pouch grows the right weight for leaving, you walk the lane 1 more time, thanking with your eyes the tools you did not take. It is sensible to let certain things remain where they live. The road has its own appetite, and you will feed it with work rather than objects. At the gate, you settle your purchases needles in their small bone case, thread coiled beside them, cola wrapped in cloth, mallet sliding into a pocket you had made for this, copper rings counted and then forgotten until needed. The bell near your hand gives a single word to signal the line. You answer by touching it and nothing more. Behind you, sellers lift cloths to keep sun from teaching their goods impatience. Ahead, the street bends toward a square where stone has learned to stay cool at noon. Your steps carry the quiet prosperity of small trades, the kind that change nothing and therefore improve everything. You step into the lane where fabrics speak before sellers do. You set down a fold of earth-colored cloth, tight woven, its hem stitched with the quiet confidence of hands that do not show off. The stall-keeper touches it with 2 fingers, reading the weft the way a reader measures a sentence. He turns it once, turns it twice, and lays it beside a strip of faded indigo sky after noon. He smiles at the contrast and asks with his brows what the cloth is meant to remember. Shade, you say. The price softens like leather after a kiss of fat. Cola sits in neat twists like sleeping snakes, red-brown, bitter as a lesson offered without apology. You take 2 nuts for the guide who teaches sleep to behave. In return, you place a small coil of cord and the promise of better thread next time. The seller snaps a nut to show the honest crisp of a clean break. You accept the taste as one accepts a rule, not to love it, only to become steadier by observing it. A tray winks with copper simple rings, a round disc already pierced for a thong, little bells born to follow rather than lead. You test a ring seam with a nail. It keeps it secret. The seller says this copper once remembered a cooking pot. You say such memory will help it behave on a strap. Both of you lower your voices and the number with them. A fair trade prefers the tone of a courtyard. A basket of needles shows bright eyes. You purchase 3, the number that spares a camp from borrowing trouble. Beside them, a spool of thread sits wound with patience enough to persuade unruly cloth to consider virtue. A small mallet fits your hand. Its wood shines from older hands. A copper ring guards the head against its own bad habits. The price you settle on leaves both of you a little proud and neither of you ridiculous. Paper crinkles around the bundle with the sound of somebody quietly pleased. A boy offers a string of carved nuts, painted in faded colors, stories trying to be beads. He asks too high, and then half again, a market's rite of passage. You buy none. You give him a knot instead, the one that tightens when a load leans and yields with one tug. He ties it poorly, then well. You praise the well and let him run to show someone who will believe he invented it. This is also trade. At the lane's end, calabashes gleam like small moons. One has been turned into a bowl with a thoughtful lip. You roll its rim along your thumb. Skin and gourd agree. The seller asks a pinch of salt. You offer the clean brightness from the pits. She adds a leaf-shaped spoon as if bowls, too, need company. You accept. Refusing gentleness makes the road longer. You keep your voice even and your gestures small. You praise workmanship the way you praise a steady camel, low, warm, sufficient. Where greed leans in, you lean toward silence. Where fairness leans toward you, a pinch of salt slips from your hand. The market rewards posture more than cleverness. When your pouch acquires the right weight for leaving, you walk the lane once more and thank with your eyes the tools you leave where they live. The road eats labor, not objects. Outside the gate, you settle your goods. Needles in their bone case, thread coiled beside them, cola wrapped in cloth, mallet in the pocket you made for it, copper rings counted once and then intentionally forgotten. The bell near your hand speaks a modest syllable. You touch it and nothing more. The caravan's sentence resumes, without hurry, as if the market had merely inserted a courteous comma. The mosque courtyard receives heat the way old stone receives a palm without complaint, without surprise. You enter on sandals that understand humility. A shallow basin keeps the faces of water and sky together. You cup your hands, rinse dust from the knuckles that tie straps, cool wrists that lifted rope, and let the last drop choose its own line into the tile's thin seams. Shade arrays itself in measured stripes beneath the arcades. Carved plaster keeps small shadows like careful ink. You sit where stone has saved a portion of night and offers it back. The air smells of lime, lamp oil that minds its manners, clean wool and paper that once drank ink slowly. Voices stay low, as if everyone were discussing the day with a considerate guest. Recitation drifts without pushing. The imam coaxes meaning. He does not wrestle it. Words braid with heat and make it kinder. Your hands rest on your knees, boat-shaped. Your breath meets the cadence halfway. Lines you own go out and return gentler. Lines you borrow leave traces like camel prints on firm sand, noticeable, not proud. Doves claim the parapets with rustle and restraint. Their feet on plaster sound like brushes touching parchment. The boy beside you follows two of them with his eyes and forgets to fidget. His shoulders set down questions they do not need. You look away so he can think he did it alone. At the edge of shade, a scribe opens his book only as wide as the morning requires. He writes a line, then closes it with two fingers, as if not to wake the words he has just arranged. An old man moves beads in a way that neither finishes nor intends to. A trader sleeps against a pillar with his mouth closed, refusing to turn breath into story. Stone under your palm keeps a faint chill, as if someone pressed a coin of moonlight into it early and left it for latecomers. You cool your temple there. Thirst hidden under manners loosens its grip. You do not plan here. Planning belongs to streets. In this square, breath sorts work into shapes that can be carried without earning a song. The imam shifts. Shade shifts with him, persuading sun to seem negotiable. Children carry a basket of sandals to a tidy corner. Sandals remember their owners without help. A broom whispers along the far edge. Dust agrees without applause. A bucket washes a square of stone in 3 pours at the pace of water itself. A traveler lays a thin mat near the wall, careful not to block a path. He faces the direction you will face when the road becomes evening. He bows, sits, stands the old conversation that keeps spines from pride. You decline to count. Counting here would be like pinning a bird. You let the bird rest and go. Before you leave, you wet your crown once more. Water remembers every hand that asked for calm and does not keep accounts. The recitation takes a last easy turn and rests. You rise with those who rise and step out with those who step out. Sandals whispering. The street resumes its wider grammar, and inside you carry a courtyard-sized silence that cools the rest of the day. The whisper begins at the square's edge, where inked fingers speak, as if letters might overhear. A teacher folds a slip of paper until it is small enough to live beneath a single nail. He shows his empty palm first the oldest way to say there is no trick. The boy beside you leans without moving. He is not yours, except in the way roads adopt intentions. A stipend, the teacher says, almost to the stones. Not large, but regular. A jar buried at the base of a wall that remembers the moon better than men do. For boys who can carry words farther than feet who can measure a shadow, then measure a sentence and know the difference. He names no patron. He offers a schedule. Schedules make dreams chewable. With his reed, he sketches a school that does not yet have walls. A low room, a neat shelf, a mat where sandals wait, a pitcher that forgives clumsy hands. He names the first lines boys will carry until they forget to put them down. Beginning, patience, the arithmetic of fairness. Ordinary words, because the work is not. You approve of ordinary words used for serious things. The boy asks the question that has been standing behind his lips all morning. Does measuring a stick's shadow count as writing words? The teacher's smile is free of trade. The first good line, he says, is the one you can draw every day. Draw that, and the jar will ask to meet you. The boy nods as if a gate has agreed to open later. Other whispers bring small shoes. A scribe adds that ledgers need readers who refuse to be hurried. A trader says gifts that forget their names need witnesses who remember them. A guide says maps written on sand want a second drawing inside the skull. It does not become a speech. It is a city straightening a mat so a guest can sit well. At last, the teacher opens his hand. 3 words, written like a rope knot plain. Snug, unlikely to slip. He taps the first. Begin here. He taps the second. Carry this when markets grow noisy. He taps the third without sound. It is the line you have been walking all day, only smaller and on paper. Coin is mentioned and then put away. The jar prefers steady kindness to sudden theater. Names go into a ledger that dust will not volunteer to read. A woman trades an egg for a place for her younger brother. An egg is a promise with a shell. The teacher accepts it as if it were a word. You place no coin on the imaginary table. You place a sentence the boy can carry. At camp, your stick will be the scribe and your palm will be the page. He repeats it like water in a cup. He asks for your bone spoon to nick a mark at the right length on the wood. You shake your head and give it anyway. Tools, like lessons, return when treated as tools. A mutter behind you says schools make boys proud. The teacher answers that thirst makes wells proud, and yet we dig. Pride is business for idle hands. The mutter loses interest. The reed keeps drawing a room that has not yet persuaded walls to exist, and you can already see it quiet as shade, useful as a lid that fits. He tucks the folded square into the boy's sleeve, as if tucking sleep into a tired eye. Bring the attention you give a knot, he says. Bring nothing else. The boy nods with the gravity of someone allowed to carry fire. You walk away without clatter. The whisper stays not rumor, instruction. The jar, wherever it waits, decides to wait as long as needed. You arrange the quiet offering with hands that prefer small gestures. A mat becomes a table. A plain cloth smooths what sand would make fidget. The ledger sleeps closed. Ceremony writes itself better without supervision. You bring sleeves of measured packets from their modest nests and lay them in an order older than you left, right, left. So weight spreads like shade and no corner grows proud. Finger-long bars keep company with dust the size of breath. You do not pour. You persuade, letting grains behave as a single thought. Each small mound wears your waxed ring a shy moon, not a boast, only a reminder that hands remember vows. A scribe stands near, but not too near. His reed rests across his knuckles like a guest who will speak when asked. A man of the house arrives without announcement. He examines neatness before numbers. Neatness is a language any floor can read. He nods at the spacing that leaves lanes for gratitude to pass. You nod back and step aside so ownership can be a private conversation between threshold and giver. Floors, like people, remember how they are treated. Two boys bring trays from the kitchen's wood, rubbed smooth by peels and loaves. They do not stare at the color of wealth. They study your hands, so you let your hands teach slowness. A tray receives 2 bars and a packet. A second tray mirrors it. A small procession learns the distance between door and ledger room. No one counts aloud. Counting is finished. Posture begins. The porter's shoulders stay level. The door opens as if it enjoys the hinge. A broom leans against the wall and pretends innocence. The bell inside your chest quiets to its smallest word, the one it uses when feet must follow other people's breath. A steward gestures to a corner table where gifts for scribes have started their own geometry. Paper, ink, a reed case, a faintly ringing purse. You add what matches that shape, a sleeve of dust wrapped like plain bread. Thanks arrives as a sentence without figures. It sits better than any sum. Women of the house enter with baskets for the storeroom and lay order with the authority of those who end days without spilling. Cloth apart from food, food from lamps, lamps from the oil that teaches leather kindness. Your sleeves obey their rules. Rules that keep rooms friendly deserve obedience. Last, you set out the quiet alms that will walk out again almost at once. A packet that will become 10 small coins, 2 bars that will turn into roofs on jars. A spoon of dust a midwife will fold into a difficult evening as a reason to stay. The keeper touches the table once with his palm. Ceremony ends where usefulness begins. You seal the emptied sleeves with a stitch and a breath, and return them to the pannier's upper world, where plain things wait. The room smells of wax and cool stone. Outside, the sun has moved a hand, and your bell remembers its larger word. It speaks, and you answer by walking lighter in ways no ledger needs to prove. A rest day opens like a clean jar-cool scent first. You begin with water and cloth. Tunics learn humility under your knuckles, sand for soap, rinse for grace. You scrub the hem where bells and dust keep their conversation, then spread the fabric on a rope between modest posts. A breeze signs its name and leaves it to dry. Leather takes the bench next. You warm fat until it forgets stiffness and teach it soft paths along straps and thongs. Corners that plot receive patience. The saddle tree gets rubbed where wood meets habit until a dull honesty of shine says enough. Stitches line up for inspection. You rethread the bone needle, pinch the thread flat, show each seam a shorter route. Last month's ugly patch earns a neat twin. Together, they look like wisdom pretending to decorate. Knots are tied to forgive quickly when asked. A future evening may ask. Ropes coil and uncoil in your lap. A conversation about circles. The boy learns the difference between a loop that behaves and a loop that sulks when wet. He learns by getting it wrong twice and right once. You praise the once and let the lesson harden in the sun. Sandals make their claims. Straps need persuasion. Soles need quiet from pebbles auditioning for permanence. You scrape, oil, and press leather to your cheek, not to admire, but to listen for where it still thinks like skin. When it remembers, you set it with the proofs of work done without applause. At midday, you wash the bell straps and the cloths that keep them from biting. Copper bells themselves receive a wipe of sour milk, a trick from another town. They dry to a calm glow that will not shout at the sun. The cracked bell moves to tea duty, where complexity sounds generous rather than tired. The camp hums in domestic keys. Pots make water into ideas. A scribe rewinds his cord of watches and knots it again with the certainty of someone who will be asked the same questions tomorrow. A guide shakes dust from his tagelmust, like forgiving a stubborn friend. You mend a pouch whose mouth had grown careless. 2 new holes, a fresh thong, a wax press. A circle within a circle, your small moon returns to duty. In one corner, a mother plants 6 perfect stitches in a child's sleeve. The child rehearses pride under a glance that keeps time. Before dusk, lines of drying things look like banners for a very sensible kingdom. Cloth sighs. Leather darkens, then lightens. Ropes lie like polite snakes. Sandals wait with open mouths. You gather everything in before dew volunteers to help. The tent becomes a shop again, fat, wool, milk, and decisions that will not need saying. You sleep certain tomorrow will find fewer reasons to clear its throat. Morning arrives with footsteps. The street is a sleeve you share with strangers who have decided that today belongs to leaving. Children imitate bells. Elders correct knots. Women press small bundles and speak short blessings. You keep the line soft, so caution and kindness can pass through without scraping. You lead the first camel past a row of brooms leaning like quiet verdicts. The square has been persuaded to behave. A sweeper nods as to a traveling cousin. A water seller tings a cup to confirm his existence. The gate's shadow lies like a mat. You step on it and feel cooler because someone swept. Buyers who delayed appear with quick eyes and slower coin. Departure keeps prices honest. You trade a coil of cord for 2 hemmed patches, leaving prefers finished edges. The boy returns with the small hammer you imagined. He looks as if he built the morning by fetching. Farewells make a mild traffic of touch arms to shoulders, palms to forearms, forehead to forehead for one breath. You keep yours simple, hand to chest. A nod that says the road is wide but time is narrow. A griot taps his gourd twice. A refrain wakes and stretches. Rumor flutters, shedding yesterday's feathers. It insists a northern caravan arrived with drums that weigh coins more tenderly than ledgers. It adds a generous house opened a new door and cannot close it fast enough. You let rumor find other roofs. You have a strap to tie. At the gate, the guard has already measured the morning with his brows. He watches a man argue with a mule, then chooses mercy. His eyes flick along your line, counting bells without moving his lips, and he decides not to be interested. This blessing keeps roadwork smooth. You repay it by being the company he expects. Quiet, orderly, willing to stand aside for a funeral and for a jug. You pass under the arch as the sun takes the hinge. Inside, the city begins a tune. Outside, it becomes air. Someone walks backward 3 steps to look at the roofline like a sleeping friend, then stops remembering out loud. The city shrinks to a smell on your sleeve bread. Ash, fennel, oiled wood. Children follow to the thorn at the bend and shout advice about dunes they have never met. You accept their expertise solemnly. It makes them proud and discourages stones. A woman raises a hand walk with your water. You answer with the same hand. At last the crowd turns into errands. The road resumes being a wide table for arranging the day in neat rows. Your line stretches, breathes, tightens like a good sentence. The boy touches his sleeve to feel the folded square still there. You do not ask to see it. The gate forgets you kindly. The desert remembers you immediately. You collect the road you brought, plus a few new names that ride lightly and weigh more than rumor. The bell returns to its even voice. The animals remember the work they prefer, none flashy, all certain. You test the first stretch with a step that greets yesterday's prints and accepts today's corrections. Sand agrees to be familiar without trying to command. A name learned at the market sits on your tongue like a date pit, smooth, purposeful. You roll it, place it, let it rest beside an older name from an older ridge. Another name, earned at the well, rides in your ear like a small drum that quiets pride, when pride decorates the pace. The last name belongs to the teacher. You do not speak it. It lives in the boy's sleeve, and walks wherever he points his questions. Wind comes from the quarter the guides foretold blew first, then a little dust. You lower your gaze to the distance a staff prefers. Bells choose their minor harmonies without asking. A strap that argued yesterday has learned better language. Oil and patience educated it. A strap that behaved continues to behave. Quiet success becomes the texture of the hour. On a ridge you whisper the new names and pair them with old ones in a private ledger. Tagaza with Thornfield, Jene with Acacia, Kumbi with a teacher star. This ledger is not for boasting, it is for returning. Names placed carefully can be found again without raising your voice. You teach the boy to set waypoints he can carry in his mouth. He repeats them like prayer, and then forgets them in the best way, letting feet remember when they must. He will recall at the right corners the way hands recall perfect knots, only when rope is present. You do not trouble him with the fear of forgetting. The road keeps spare copies of essential things. At noon the sun lays metal on the sand. You borrow its light for the scribe's book. He draws the day as rows, circles, and two small triangles for trouble that did not arrive. He writes the names in his small script for good news, steady, unexcited, useful tomorrow. In the afternoon you meet tracks you left last week. Surprised they survive with character intact. You set your feet inside them only when they agree with today's sense. Fidelity, not superstition. Where they disagree, today wins. The bell agrees because it cares about rhythm, not nostalgia. Shade comes late and simple. At rest you cool a bell in damp cloth and murmur the names once more, testing their hooks. The boy asks whether names rust. Only if left outside with pride, you say. He decides to keep his folded square dry, even if rain invents itself here. The thought pleases him into quiet. Night lights its first bright grain, and the path feels shorter by the length of a word. Evening repeats its trick. It makes work look like memory. You stake the line where ground knows how to hold it. A crest that will not argue at midnight. Animals fold their knees in the order they prefer. You call it courtesy and leave it at that. Bells are turned down, mouths silenced with 2 fingers. The day loosens its collar. Fire begins with the smallest sound a spark knows. Tinder accepts the invitation without showing off. Tea thinks about bitterness and chooses to be instructive. You break dates into a bowl and scatter nuts bought while the gate still remembered you. The mix tastes like markets you have let go on purpose so the road can be its own home again. The scribe opens his book halfway and writes 3 short lines: distance, kindness, repair. He tucks the reed as if respecting a small elder. A guide draws tomorrow's route with a fingertip same plan. 1 polite amendment for wind, then erases it and lets the erased line remain in muscles. The boy sets the gourd on folded cloth. The griot begins with walking how feet trust bell sentences, how ground returns the favor, how gossip must be carried like milk. Covered, not churned. Strings hold a river, and your breath chooses which stones to touch and which to skip. No one claps. That is the point. He sings the generous hand's verse without saying king. A man whose sandals collect dust like yours. Scales that laugh and go back to work. Courtyards that make extra shade for strangers and later have better stories to tell themselves. The song fits into the space between spoon and bowl. It asks for nothing but listening. Someone adds a line about salt learning humility in tea. Someone else tucks a folded square deeper into a sleeve to rhyme with the refrain. The boy's ears try to look ordinary and fail. The fire approves by behaving. Sparks rise like brief birds and do not insist on metaphors. The pot balances on 3 stones that have heard more verses than most. You tighten a strap that preferred surprise earlier and tell it evening is a school too. Leather learns more at dusk than at noon. A bell shows the hair of a crack that has not grown. Tomorrow it will retire to call tea. Tonight it still keeps time honest. Tea grows persuasive. You drink and hold it as if hospitality could be learned through the tongue. The griot plays a closing line that convinces the night to carry the tune a little while after the gourd is wrapped. Night agrees and rests. Sunset arrives like coins you refuse to spend. Light pours over animal backs like new coin, then leaves darkness along their knees where work lives. The bell at your hand brightens to copper red, and then remembers to be quiet. You step with slow gladness, knowing the shop will close and open as it should. You do not count gifts, you count breaths. 4 to rise, 4 to half step, 4 to settle. The day accepts your arithmetic and stops adding distractions. Sand releases heat the way a ledger releases coin, reluctant, then resigned. Warmth lifts around ankles and drifts off with decent manners. The sky lays a thin cloth of color. The boy points with his chin at birds leaving their roost. A guide folds a map into a gesture. The scribe closes his book and taps the cover once. The day simplifies beyond speech. You walk the line and touch straps with the backs of your fingers, no demands, only acknowledgments. A pannier answers with the firmness of settled weight. A waterskin sighs and sits. The cracked bell, retired to tea duty, lies like a small moon and does not complain. You thank it with a glance. Tools prefer farewells without drama. Far off, the ridge shortens to a word, then a dot, then a friendly nothing. Nearer, shadows tie themselves to stakes. Fire accepts a shallow pit. Bread rises in a clay lip with unshowy optimism. Someone repeats the line about hands that forget to close. It lands softly and stays useful. You think of all the gold you did not see because you were busy with things that carry it. You think of the generosity you did see rope offered without asking. Dates divided exactly. A bucket handed to the newest mouth first. A scribe who made room for a boy's name beside itineraries. You prefer this accounting. The numbers come unbidden and sit where there is space. When prayer comes, it arrives lightly. Mats lie down. Knees remember the floor. Foreheads meet the idea of ground and like it. The sun gives a last coin and pockets the sky. You finish what you owe and stand in the cooler air of promise. In the last light, you test seals by touch and find a neat field of moons beneath your palm. You draw a finger along the rope between stakes and feel agreement. The boy shows you his folded square without unfolding it and says nothing. You nod. That says enough. Night lifts like a curtain and finds you ready. Bells face down. Ropes relax. Fires complete their small red sermons. The caravan becomes a paragraph you stop reading at the right line, trusting the next sentence to be waiting in the morning. You lie on your side and listen to leather cooling, a page relaxing after ink. The stars take their places as patient accountants of quiet. Sleep finds you doing nothing, which is precisely the work. You lie where the sand has cooled into careful support, the ground keeping its slow promise under your shoulders. You feel the caravan fold around you like a wide, patient blanket, stakes quiet in their holes. Ropes slack with good behavior. Fire a small red bowl that argues with nothing. Breath becomes the only work, and even that needs little guidance. In, to meet the faint spice that lingers in wool. Out, to set down the last weight your thoughts tried to carry past dark. You notice how the night has removed the sharp edges from every shape. Panniers look like sleeping animals. Sleeping animals look like furniture that remembers kindness. A bell lies on its side, mouth turned to earth, holding silence the way it held sound steadily, without complaint. Somewhere, a rope creaks once, and then decides it has said enough. The sky is clear in the old manner. Stars keep their quiet arithmetic, counting nothing that troubles you. You let the day arrange itself into small shelves. The first shelf keeps the steady feet, the even bells, the courteous gait. The second keeps the measured cups, the shade under acacia, the page of stone in the courtyard. The third holds the teacher's folded square, the knot that loosens kindly, the names that ride in your mouth without demanding to be spoken. You close each shelf with a soft hand. Nothing spills. Wind passes over camp like a hand, smoothing a coverlet. It moves a thread, lifts a grain, chooses not to wake you. You agree to sleep the way you agreed to walk, without hurry, without drama, with a decent respect for small things done well. Breath in. The road shortens behind the ribs. Breath out. The road unrolls ahead without asking questions. You turn once, feel leather cool beside your cheek, and stop needing any story at all. Night keeps watch. You rest. We hope this quiet step into another time has left you feeling rested. If you've enjoyed it, you're welcome to like, share, or leave a gentle note. And if you'd like more slow walks through history, you can subscribe and join us again. End of script. Sweet dreams.